I lost my home in one night. When I called my parents shaking on the curb, they answered with 5 words. Not our problem. Be more careful. But a week later, my insurer revealed a document I never signed. Then a fire investigator asked the question that turned my grief into a map. Who had access to your apartment? That fire exposed who was willing to burn my life down just to get paid for it. My name is Vivian Ortiz. I am 31 years old, and until 3 hours ago, I lived on the 5th floor of the Element Complex in Lakewood Heights, Colorado. I say lived because looking up at the black skeleton of what used to be my apartment, the word feels like it belongs to a different lifetime, for years. That apartment was more than just rented square footage, it was my fortress. After a decade of scraping by, jumping between roommates who stole my yogurt and landlords who refused to fix the heat, I had finally carved out a space that was entirely mine. It was a 1-bedroom unit with a view of the distant mountains if you craned your neck just right, and it smelled like vanilla candles and old books. It was the physical proof that I had made it, that I was independent, and that I did not need anyone to hold my hand, especially not my family. I had spent the last 5 years carefully constructing a life that kept my mother, Denise, and my stepfather, Frank, at a comfortable distance. We were low contact, the kind of relationship where you send a text on holidays and ignore the passive-aggressive comments on social media. I thought I was safe. I thought distance was a shield. I was wrong. It happened at 2:58 in the morning. I know the time because the last thing I saw before the world turned into a nightmare was the glowing red numbers on my digital alarm clock. I had been in a deep sleep, the kind of exhaustion that comes after finishing a massive project for work. The silence of the room was shattered not by a gradual noise, but by a screaming, mechanical shriek that seemed to vibrate inside my teeth. The smoke alarm. Usually, when a smoke alarm goes off, your brain tries to rationalize it. You think about burnt toast or a steamy shower. But this was different. Even before I opened my eyes, the smell hit me. It was not the smell of overcooked food or a fireplace. It was heavy, acrid, and chemical. It tasted like burning rubber and gasoline. A thick, oily taste that coated the back of my throat instantly. I sat up, coughing, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The room was already hazy. A thin layer of gray smoke was curling under the bedroom door, moving with a terrifying liquid speed. Fire, I whispered, the word lost in the shrieking alarm. Adrenaline is a strange drug. It erased the fatigue instantly, replacing it with a singular, primal command. Run! I threw the covers off. My feet hit the hardwood floor, and even though the fire was not in the bedroom yet, the floor felt warm. That terrified me more than the noise. The heat was already underneath me. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand. That was it. I did not grab my laptop with 3 years of graphic design portfolios. I did not grab the box of jewelry my grandmother left me. I did not grab my coat. I just grabbed the phone, unlocked the bedroom door, and was blasted by a wall of heat that singed the hair on my arms. The living room was a war zone. The curtains were gone, replaced by sheets of orange and blue flame. The couch was burning, but the center of it, the heart of the beast, seemed to be coming from the far wall, near the kitchen. It was roaring. Fires are loud. That is something movies never get right. They do not just crackle. They roar like a jet engine taking off. I dropped to my knees. The air was clearer down there. I crawled, my knees scraping against the wood, eyes stinging and watering so badly I could barely see the front door. I could hear glass shattering somewhere, maybe my windows blowing out from the pressure. I reached the door, fumbled with the deadbolt, and threw myself out into the hallway. The hallway was filled with people, neighbors in pajamas, clutching cats, crying children, confused elderly couples. The chaos was absolute. I scrambled to my feet, my lungs heaving, desperate for oxygen that did not taste like poison. "Don't use the elevator!" someone screamed. I joined the stampede toward the stairwell. I was barefoot. I remember the sensation of the cold concrete stairs on my soles, gritty with dust. I ran down 5 flights, my hand gripping the railing so hard my knuckles turned white. All I could think about was the heat I had left behind. It felt unnatural. It felt aggressive. When we burst out of the lobby doors and into the parking lot, the cold air slapped me in the face. It was February in Colorado. There was a thin layer of snow on the ground, crusted and icy. I stood there, shivering violently, gasping for air, watching my breath cloud in front of me. I turned around to look at the building. It was a monster. Flames were licking up the side of the structure, pouring out of the windows on the 5th floor. My windows. The glass was gone. And the fire looked like a giant, glowing mouth that was swallowing everything I owned. It was eating my memories. It was eating the photo albums I hadn't digitized. It was eating my passport, my birth certificate, my favorite sweater. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder. A symphony of disaster approaching. I stood in the snow, barefoot, wearing only a thin pair of cotton pajamas, clutching my phone like a lifeline. The next hour was a blur of red and blue lights. The fire department arrived with the force of an army. Hoses were dragged, ladders extended. I watched them battle the beast that had taken residence in my home. I stood near the ambulance, refusing medical attention because I was not burned, just choked. A firefighter approached me. He looked exhausted, his face smeared with soot, his helmet tucked under his arm. I recognized him as the one who had been directing the water toward my unit. "You're the resident of 502?" he asked. His voice was rough. I nodded, wrapping my arms around myself to stop the shaking. Is anything left?" He looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw the answer before he spoke. It was a look of pity that cut deeper than the cold. "I am sorry, ma'am. The structural damage is severe. The roof collapsed over the living area. Your unit, it is essentially gone. We managed to stop it from spreading to the 6th floor, but 502 is a total loss." A total loss. The words hung in the freezing air. I felt a physical blow to my stomach. I had no renter's insurance. Wait, no, I did. I had Harborstone. I paid the premium every month. But that didn't fix tonight. That didn't bring back the hard drive with my client files due on Friday. That didn't bring back the feeling of safety. I was homeless, in the middle of the night, with nothing but a cell phone with 12% battery. The reality of my situation crashed down on me. I had nowhere to go. My friends lived across town, and at 3 a.m, I felt paralyzed by the burden of asking them. But I had family. I had parents. It is a strange instinct, the way we revert to being children when the world breaks us. Despite the years of coldness, despite the subtle jabs and the emotional distance, my brain screamed, "Call your mother." I stepped away from the crowd, finding a spot near a street lamp where the shadows were long. My fingers were stiff with cold as I scrolled to Mom in my contacts. I hesitated for a second. The old anxiety flared up, the fear of disturbing her, the fear of her judgment, but I looked at my burning apartment, and the fear of being alone in the snow outweighed the fear of her voice. I pressed call. It rang, and rang, and rang. "Pick up, please. Just pick up." "Hello?" It was Denise. Her voice was thick with sleep, and immediately sharp with irritation. "Mom," I choked out. My voice was broken, unrecognizable even to myself. "Mom, it's Vivian." "Vivian?" She sighed. A long, exasperated sound. "Do you have any idea what time it is? It is 3 a.m. Is this another one of your dramas?" "No," I said, tears finally spilling over, hot tracks on my freezing cheeks. "No, Mom, listen, my apartment. There was a fire. It's gone. Everything is gone." There was a silence on the other end. I waited for the gasp. I waited for the, "Oh my God, are you okay?" I waited for the, "Where are you? We are coming." Instead, I heard rustling, the sound of the phone being passed. "Vivian?" It was Frank, my stepfather. His voice was not sleepy. It was flat, cold, the voice of a man who looked at a spreadsheet and found a discrepancy. "Frank," I said, relieved to hear a male voice. thinking maybe he would take charge. The apartment burned down. I'm on the street. I don't have shoes. I don't know what to do. Can I come home? Just for a night or two? Please. I held my breath. I needed them to be parents. Just for tonight. I needed to not be the independent daughter, the black sheep, the success story. I needed to be the child who lost her home. Vivian, Frank said. He spoke slowly, articulating every syllable. You are 31 years old. You wanted to live alone. You wanted your independence. Frank, please, it's freezing, I begged, humiliation burning in my throat. This is not our problem, Frank said. The words were precise. They were not angry. They were dismissive, like he was shooing away a solicitor at the door. What? I whispered. We have guests coming this weekend. We can't have you here bringing your chaos, Frank continued, his tone devoid of any empathy. You need to handle your own life. Be more careful next time. Frank, click. The line went dead. I stared at the phone screen. The call had lasted 45 seconds. Not our problem. Be more careful. I lowered the phone slowly. The sounds of the fire truck seemed to fade into a dull buzz. I walked over to the curb and sat down. The snow soaked instantly through my thin pajama pants, freezing my skin, but I barely felt it. A neighbor, a kind older woman named Mrs. Higgins from 4B, saw me and draped a heavy wool blanket over my shoulders. Oh, honey, she cooed, patting my back. It's okay. You're alive. That's what matters. I pulled the blanket tighter, rocking slightly. I was shaking, but not from the cold anymore. I was shaking from the shock of what had just happened on that phone call. They didn't ask if I was hurt. The thought looped in my mind. They didn't ask if I was burned. They didn't ask if I was in the hospital. They didn't ask if I was alive. Frank had told me to be more careful, as if I had left a candle burning, as if I had been juggling torches. But how did he know I wasn't careful? How did he know it was my fault? And then, a memory hit me. It was so sharp it cut through the fog of trauma. 4 days ago, Denise had come to visit. It was unprecedented. Denise never visited. In the 2 years I had lived at the Element, she had never set foot inside my building. She always made excuses. Too far. Too much traffic. She didn't like the neighborhood, but 4 days ago, on a Friday afternoon, she had called and said she was in the area and wanted to drop by. I remembered opening the door, surprised to see her. She wasn't wearing her usual casual clothes. She was dressed up, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and oversized sunglasses, clutching a large black handbag. Just wanted to see how you are living, she had said, pushing past me into the apartment. She hadn't sat down. She hadn't accepted the tea I offered. Instead, she had walked the perimeter of the apartment. I remembered watching her, feeling awkward. She touched everything. She ran her fingers along the curtains in the living room. She looked behind the TV console where the mess of wires was. You have a lot of electronics, she had commented, staring at the surge protector. Ideally for work, I had replied. She had wandered into the kitchen. She opened the pantry, then closed it. She looked at the stove. Do you use the timer often? She had asked. What? The timer. On the stove. Or for your lights. Do you use timers? No, Mom. Why? Just checking, she had said vaguely. Safety first. Then she had gone into the bedroom, my sanctuary. She stood there for a long time, looking at the closet, looking at the bed. She had asked me strange questions. When do you usually leave for work on Tuesdays? I don't know. Mom, around 8:30. Why? And you come back late? You have that gym class? Yeah, Tuesday is leg day. I'm usually back by 8 in the evening. Good, she had murmured. Good routine. She had left 20 minutes later. She didn't hug me goodbye. She just looked at me with an expression I couldn't read, something calculating, something cold, and said, Take care of yourself. Vivian. Sitting on the curb, watching the smoke billow into the night sky. That memory replayed in my head like a horror movie. She had touched the curtains. She had checked the outlets. She had asked about my schedule. She had confirmed when the apartment would be empty. And tonight, when I called her, she wasn't worried. She was annoyed. And Frank was defensive. Be more careful. I looked at the burning building. The fire investigator was arriving now, a man in a white helmet stepping out of a specialized van. He looked at the building not with sadness, but with curiosity. He was looking for a cause. It's just a coincidence, I whispered to myself, my teeth chattering. Stop it. Vivian, you are traumatized. You are looking for someone to blame. Your mother is a narcissist, sure, but she is not a monster. She wouldn't. But deep in my gut, beneath the fear and the cold, a small, hard knot of suspicion was tightening. It felt heavy. It felt like lead. Mothers worry when their children call at 3 a.m. Stepfathers offer a couch when a house burns down. They don't tell you it's not their problem, unless it was never a problem for them, unless it was a solution. I stared at the fire, and for the first time, the heat didn't feel like an accident. It felt like a weapon. And as I wrapped the neighbor's wool blanket tighter around my shivering body, I realized that the coldness coming from my family was far more dangerous than the fire that had just destroyed my life. This was not clean. I wiped the soot from my phone screen and looked at the call log. 45 seconds. That was all it took to break the last thread connecting me to them. I watched the fire investigator walk toward the entrance, his flashlight cutting through the smoke. He was going to find out what started this. And suddenly, I wasn't just a victim sitting on a curb. I was a witness to my own destruction. And I needed to know why, because if Denise and Frank were involved, if they knew, I shivered. And this time, it had nothing to do with the snow. The car ride to Ethan Cole's apartment was a blur of streetlights and silence. Ethan, a senior graphic designer at my firm, had picked me up from the curb without a single question about why I was barefoot in the snow or why my parents had hung up on me. He had simply arrived, opened the passenger door, and turned the heater up to the maximum setting. When we walked into his place, the contrast to the freezing night outside was almost violent. His apartment was warm. It smelled of coffee grounds and cedarwood, a stark difference from the acrid, chemical stench of burning plastic that was currently embedded in my pores. "Here," Ethan said, handing me a thick, gray hoodie and a pair of sweatpants. "They will be big, but they are clean." I took them, my hands still trembling slightly. "Thank you. Ethan, I don't know what I would have done." "Don't worry about it," he said, turning toward his kitchen so he wouldn't have to watch me struggle to keep my composure. "Go shower. I will make tea, the kind with the ginger you like." Standing under the hot spray of his shower, I watched the water turn gray as it washed the soot from my skin. I scrubbed until my skin was raw, trying to wash away the feeling of the fire, but more than that, trying to wash away the sound of Frank's voice. Not our problem. It played on a loop in my head. A broken record of rejection. When I came out, wrapped in Ethan's oversized clothes, he was sitting on his couch, typing on his laptop. He had set up a charging station for my phone on the coffee table. He pointed to it. "Plug in," he said, "and drink this." He slid a mug across the table. I sat down, pulling my knees to my chest. Ethan did not ask what happened. He did not ask why my mother wasn't here. He did not ask why I had no emergency bag. He just sat there, working quietly, offering his presence as a silent, sturdy wall against the chaos of my night. That simple decency made a lump form in my throat. My own mother had treated my call for help as an annoyance. Yet here was a colleague I mostly knew from lunch breaks and deadline crunches, giving me a safe harbor without asking for a dime of explanation. The kindness felt foreign. It made my family's cruelty look even sharper, like a black stain on a white sheet. The next 2 days were a fugue state of logistics. I had to rebuild a life from zero, and I quickly learned that disaster recovery is 90% paperwork and 10% crying in public restrooms. I took half a day off work. Brightcrest Media was understanding, mostly because Ethan had briefed them before I even logged on, and went to a department store. Walking through the aisles was a surreal experience. I stood in front of the toothbrushes for 10 minutes, paralyzed by the choice. I had to buy underwear, socks, a cheap coat, and basic toiletries. Every item I put in the basket felt like a heavy admission of defeat. I was buying these things because the ones I chose, the ones I loved, were ash. I spent the afternoon at the leasing office of the Element, or what was left of it. The management was operating out of a temporary trailer in the parking lot. Mr. Dalton Reyes, the building manager, looked as shell-shocked as I felt. He gave me a generic letter confirming my tenancy and the fire event so I could start my insurance claim. "We are so sorry, Ms. Ortiz," he kept saying, rubbing his forehead. "We are cooperating fully with the fire department." Back at Ethan's apartment, I sat at his dining table with a legal pad, trying to make a list of lost inventory for Harborstone Assurance. This was the part they didn't tell you about. You have to remember everything. 1 Apple MacBook Pro, 3 years old, 1 vintage leather armchair, purchased at an estate sale, 4 boxes of art supplies, my grandmother's pearl necklace. I stopped writing. The pen shook in my hand. The necklace was gone. The only thing I had left of her. I put the pen down and pressed the heels of my hands into my eyes, forcing the tears back. Crying wouldn't bring the pearls back. Getting the insurance money would not replace them. But it would at least let me pay for a deposit on a new place so I could stop sleeping on Ethan's couch. I picked up my phone and dialed the number for Harborstone Assurance. I had filed the initial claim online the morning after the fire, but the status still showed as pending review. I needed to talk to a human. The hold music was a tinny, upbeat jazz tune that felt mocking given the circumstances. Finally, the line clicked. "Harborstone Assurance, Claims Department. This is Mason speaking." "Hi, Mason. My name is Vivian Ortiz. I'm calling about claim number 49220 regarding the fire at Lakewood Heights." There was the sound of typing on the other end. "Ortiz? Vivian? Yes, Unit 502. "Right. I was wondering what the next steps are. I have the police report number and the letter from my landlord. I am working on the inventory list now. Can I upload that to the portal?" The typing stopped. There was a pause. It was a beat too long to be a standard delay. "Ms. Ortiz," Mason said. His voice had shifted. The practiced customer service warmth had evaporated, replaced by a cautious, guarded tone. "Actually, I see here that there is a flag on your file." My stomach tightened. A flag? What kind of flag? I paid my premiums. I have never missed a month. "No, it is not about the payments," Mason said quickly. "It is about the policy details. There are some discrepancies regarding the coverage updates. I cannot really discuss the specifics over the phone." I gripped the phone tighter. "What do you mean you can't discuss it? It is my policy. I am the policyholder." "I understand that, ma'am. However, given the nature of the claim and the recent modifications to the account, our protocol requires an in-person verification. We need you to come down to the local branch. We have an office on 3rd Avenue. "Modifications?" I asked, my voice rising. "I haven't modified anything. I haven't touched that policy in 2 years. As I said, ma'am, it is better if we review the documents together. Can you come in tomorrow morning? Say 9 o'clock? Yes, I can be there," I said, confused and increasingly anxious. "Good. Please bring 2 forms of identification." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, a cold, prickly sensation spreading across the back of my neck. "Everything okay?" I jumped. Ethan was standing in the kitchen doorway, holding a bag of takeout. He had obviously heard the end of the conversation. "I don't know," I said, putting the phone down slowly. "That was the insurance agent. He wouldn't talk to me. He said there were modifications to my policy and I have to go to the office in person." Ethan frowned, walking over to set the food on the table. "In person? For renter's insurance? That sounds weird. Viv, usually, they just want you to upload photos and receipts. Why would they need to see you?" He said something about a flag on the file. "A flag?" Ethan pulled a container of pad thai out of the bag. "Like fraud? Or non-payment?" He said it wasn't payment. He just said, Recent modifications. But I haven't changed anything. I set that policy up when I moved in and put it on autopay. Ethan opened a pair of chopsticks and pointed them at me. That sounds like a movie, where the protagonist finds out their identity has been stolen or something. Are you sure it was actually Harborstone? Yes, I dialed the number on their website. I tried to laugh, but it came out as a dry, hacking sound. Maybe I just filled out the form wrong. Maybe, Ethan said, but his eyes remained serious. Do you want me to go with you? I can take a late start tomorrow. No, you have done enough, I started to say. Vivian, he interrupted gently, you are running on fumes. You just lost everything. You don't have to do the scary meetings alone. I will drive you. I will sit in the lobby and play games on my phone, just so you know someone is there. I looked at him, gratitude warring with my pride. Pride lost. Okay, thank you. That night, sleep was impossible. The sofa was comfortable, but my brain was wired. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flames. Every time I drifted off, I heard the crackling sound of my life disintegrating. At 2 a.m, I gave up. I sat up and pulled my laptop onto my lap. It was an old backup laptop I had retrieved from my desk at work. Thank God for cloud storage. But it was slow. I navigated to the Harborstone Assurance website. I needed to see what Mason was talking about. I logged in. My hands were clammy, the dashboard loaded, showing my active policy. Policy number HS-88392-CO. Status: active coverage. Limit: $160,000. It looked normal. I clicked on the Documents tab. There was a list of PDFs, the initial application from 2 years ago, the annual renewal notices, and then, near the top of the list, a file name that made my breath hitch. Policy_update_V 3.pdf. The date next to it was from 7 months ago, July 14th. I frowned. July? What was I doing in July? I was working on the rebranding for the organic soda account. I was pulling 12-hour days. I definitely wasn't updating my insurance policy. I moved the cursor to the Activity Log section. It showed a history of logins and changes. I scrolled down to July 14th. There it was. Login detected. July 14th, 6:12 p.m. Action. Beneficiary information updated. Action. Coverage adjustment submitted. Action. Electronic signature verified. 6:12 in the evening. I stared at the timestamp. Why did that time feel familiar? Not just the date, but the specific time. 6:12. I opened a new tab and logged into my personal calendar. I scrolled back through the months, searching for July, July 10th, July 11th, July 12th, July 14th. There was a blue block on the calendar for that evening. The entry read, Mom stopping by. My heart stopped, literally, skipped a beat and then slammed against my ribs with a painful thud. I remembered that day. It was summer. It was hot. Denise had called me that morning, saying she was in the neighborhood for a dentist appointment and wanted to drop off a box of old mail she had found. I had told her I would be home by 6, but I hadn't been home by 6. I had gotten stuck at the office with a rendering issue. I remembered texting her, running late, be there by 6:30. I left the key under the mat just in case. She had texted back, no worries, I will let myself in and wait. I arrived home at 6:45. Denise was sitting on my couch, reading a magazine. The box of mail was on the table. She had stayed for 15 minutes, complained about my choice of throw pillows, and left. But between 6 o'clock and 6:45, she was alone in my apartment, and the insurance policy was accessed at 6:12. I looked back at the Harborstone tab. The login had come from a device labeled Windows PC, Chrome browser. I didn't own a Windows PC. I was a designer. I lived and died by Apple products. My work computer was a Mac. My personal laptop was a Mac. My phone was an iPhone. But my old desktop computer, the one I kept in the corner of the living room for gaming and file storage, the one I rarely turned on. That was a Windows machine, and it didn't have a password because I lived alone and never thought I needed one. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to put the laptop down on the coffee table. She was in my apartment. She had access to my computer. She knew where I kept my files. "It's not possible," I whispered to the empty room. "That's insane. That's paranoid." But the numbers were staring at me. July 14th, 6:12 in the evening, a policy update I didn't make, a login from a computer I wasn't using, a mother who had been in the room, and then the fire. 7 months later. The fire. I thought about her visit 4 days ago. The way she walked around the apartment. "Safety first," she had said. "Do you use timers?" I grabbed my notebook, the one with the list of lost items, and turned to a fresh page. My hand was shaking so hard the pen tip dug into the paper. I started writing a timeline. July 14th. Denise visits. Alone in apartment. Insurance policy updated. January 30th. Denise visits after 2 years of absence. Checks outlets. Asks about schedule. February 3rd. Fire destroys apartment. February 3rd. Parents say, "Not our problem." The dates didn't just line up. They locked together like the teeth of a zipper. I sat back, the darkness of the room pressing in on me. The warmth of Ethan's apartment suddenly felt suffocating. I wasn't safe. I thought I was dealing with a tragedy, an accident, a stroke of bad luck, but this looked like architecture. This looked like a blueprint. The email from Harborstone was not just a bureaucratic glitch, it was the smoking gun. I looked at the bedroom door where Ethan was sleeping. He had joked about it sounding like a movie. He didn't know how right he was. But this wasn't a thriller where the hero runs around with a gun. This was a horror story where the monster wears your mother's face. I closed the laptop. I didn't open the PDF to see what the changes were. I was too terrified of what I would see. I needed to be in that office. I needed to see Mason face to face. I needed to see the signature. I curled up on the sofa, pulling the blanket up to my chin. But the shivering wouldn't stop. I lay there with my eyes wide open, watching the digital clock on the cable box tick forward. 3:12, 3:13. I waited for the sun. I had never wanted the night to end so badly. Tomorrow morning, I wasn't just going to an insurance meeting, I was going to a crime scene investigation. And the victim was my own life. I would go to Harborstone, and Ethan would come with me. I needed him, because if I walked into that room and found out what I thought I was going to find out, I was going to need someone to hold me up when the ground finally gave way. The office of Harborstone Assurance was a study in aggressive neutrality. It was a place designed to calm people down while simultaneously denying them what they needed. The walls were painted a soft, non-committal beige. The carpet was a low-pile gray that swallowed the sound of footsteps. The air conditioning was set to a temperature that was just slightly too cold, keeping everyone alert and uncomfortable. I sat in a small conference room with glass walls that were frosted from the waist up. Across the table from me sat Mason, in person. He looked younger than he sounded on the phone, perhaps in his late 20s, wearing a dress shirt that was slightly too tight at the neck and a tie that looked like an obligatory afterthought. He had a thick file folder in front of him. His hands were clasped on top of it, fingers interlaced, creating a barrier between me and the information I needed. "Ms. Ortiz," Mason began. His voice lowered as if we were discussing state secrets rather than renter's insurance. "Thank you for coming in so quickly. I know this is a difficult time. Let's just get to it." "Mason," I said. My voice sounded flat to my own ears. I was wearing the clothes Ethan had bought me. A simple pair of jeans and a black sweater. I felt like an imposter in my own life, playing the role of a functioning adult while my internal world was still smoking rubble. "You said there were modifications. You said there was a flag." Mason nodded once. He opened the folder. He didn't slide it across the table immediately. Instead, he pulled out a series of documents and laid them out in a precise row. "Face up. This is your original policy application," he said, tapping the first sheet. "Standard coverage, personal property liability, Loss of use, all standard. I nodded. I remembered signing that. It was the day I got the keys to the apartment. I had felt so responsible, so grown up. And this, he said, pulling out a second sheet, is the renewal from last year. Again, standard. He paused. His eyes flicked up to meet mine. And for a second, I saw genuine discomfort there. He didn't want to do this part. And this, he said, placing a third document on the table, is the Beneficiary and Policy Adjustment Form, dated July 14th of last year. He spun the paper around so it faced me. The header was bold and official. Beneficiary Designation Update. I looked at the date. July 14th, the day Denise had been in my apartment. The day the computer log showed a login at 6:12 in the evening. My eyes scanned down the page. I expected to see a mistake. I expected to see a clerical error, maybe a wrong account number, but the text was clear. Printed in sharp, black ink. Primary beneficiaries. Name, Denise Mallory. Relationship, mother percentage, 50%. Name, Frank Mallory. Relationship, stepfather percentage, 50%. Total allocation, 100%. The room went silent. I mean, truly silent. The hum of the air conditioner dropped away. The sound of phones ringing in the distance vanished. All I could hear was a high-pitched ringing in my ears, a physiological scream. "What is this?" I whispered. My lips felt numb. "It is a designation change," Mason said softly. "It redirects any claim payouts in the event of your incapacitation or death, or, and this is the specific clause added here, in the event of a total loss claim where the policyholder is unable to manage the funds due to distress." Distress, I repeated. The word tasted like ash. "Look at the bottom. Ms. Ortiz," Mason said. He extended a pen and pointed to the signature line. I looked. There, in blue ink, was my name, Vivian Ortiz. I stared at it. The loop of the V was perfect. The sharp cross of the T, the way the Z trailed off at the end. It was my signature. It was exactly how I signed my checks. It was exactly how I signed my lease. But I had never seen this piece of paper in my life. "That looks like my signature," I said, my voice trembling. "But I didn't sign this." Mason leaned back, his chair creaking. "We have a digital verification on file, but this hard copy was also scanned into the system. And Ms. Ortiz, this is the part that triggered the flag." He tapped the paper again. "This form wasn't mailed in. It wasn't uploaded through the portal." I looked up at him. "What do you mean?" "It was submitted in person," Mason said. "At this branch, July 15th, the day after the digital update." The floor seemed to tilt beneath my chair. "In person?" I asked. "Yes. A woman came in. She presented identification. She claimed to be you. She sat at this very table, perhaps, or one just like it, and she signed this document in front of a notary." I felt the blood drain from my face. It wasn't just hacking. It wasn't just guessing a password on an unprotected computer. Someone had walked into this building. Someone had looked a stranger in the eye. Someone had worn my name like a costume. "Who?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. The nausea was rising in my throat, hot and violent. Mason didn't answer the question directly. He just looked at the names on the beneficiary line. Denise Mallory. "The identification presented matched the policyholder details," Mason said carefully. "Our clerk at the time noted that the customer was wearing a large hat and sunglasses, claiming she had an eye infection, but the ID checked out. My mother. She had come to my apartment on the 14th. She had accessed my computer to get my policy details, and then, the very next day, she had walked into this office, pretending to be me, and signed over the rights to my life." "Why?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Why would they do this? It's just stuff. It's furniture. It's clothes." Mason looked down at his calculator. He punched in a few numbers. "The policy covers replacement cost, not actual cash value," he said. "Plus the loss of use, plus the structural liability, which in this case might be paid out to you directly if the landlord's insurance covers the rebuild. The total estimated payout for a claim of this magnitude, given your coverage limits. He turned the calculator toward me. The number was glowing in green liquid crystal digits. $160,000. $160,000, Mason said. The ringing in my ears stopped. It was replaced by a sudden, clarifying coldness. $160,000. That was why. That was why Frank had said, "Not our problem." That was why Denise had been so annoyed when I called. They didn't want to help me. They didn't want me to come home, because if I came home, if I was safe and sound and managing my own affairs, I would be the one filing the claim. I would be the one getting the check. But if I was distressed, if I was unstable, or missing, or perhaps even dead, the money went to them. Not our problem, I whispered. It wasn't a dismissal. It was a strategy. They weren't ignoring the fire. They were waiting for the check. I looked at Mason. His face was pale. He realized what he was showing me. He was showing me that my parents had bet against my survival. "There is one more thing," Mason said. He closed the folder, his hand resting heavily on top of it. "You are not the only one asking questions today, Ms. Ortiz." My heart hammered against my ribs. "What do you mean?" "We received a call this morning, early, before the branch even opened." Mason lowered his voice further. "It was from the fire department, specifically, a fire investigator." "An investigator?" "Yes. They requested a copy of your policy. They requested the history of changes, specifically the changes made in July." Mason leaned forward. "They didn't tell me much, but investigator inquiries usually mean one thing. They don't think the fire was an accident." The air in the room seemed to vanish. Arson. They thought it was arson, and if the investigator saw this paperwork, if he saw that my parents stood to gain $160,000 from the ashes of my home, he wouldn't just see insurance fraud. He would see a motive for murder. "Ms. Ortiz," Mason said, standing up, "I cannot process this claim today. The funds are frozen pending the investigation. I needed you to know, if you didn't sign this, you need to protect yourself, because right now, on paper, it looks like you set this up." I stood up. My legs felt like wood. I grabbed my purse. I didn't say thank you. I couldn't. "Can I have a copy?" I asked. "Of that page?" Mason hesitated, then nodded. "I will make one copy, unofficial." He walked to a machine in the corner. The light scanned the forgery. He handed me the warm piece of paper. I took it. I didn't look at it again. I folded it until it was a small, sharp square and shoved it into my pocket. I walked out of the conference room. The lobby was bright, too bright. People were sitting in chairs, looking at their phones, waiting to discuss premiums and deductibles. They looked so normal. They had no idea that a few feet away, a family had just been revealed as a nest of vipers. Ethan was sitting near the entrance. He was scrolling on his tablet, looking bored. When he saw me, he stood up immediately. He took one look at my face and his expression shifted from casual to alarmed. "Viv," he said, stepping toward me. "What happened? You look like you have seen a ghost." I stopped in the middle of the lobby. I felt like I was floating. The connection between my brain and my body was fraying. I reached out and grabbed the strap of his messenger bag, just to feel something solid. "Ethan," I said. My voice was raspy, like I had swallowed smoke all over again. "What is it? Did they deny the claim?" I looked him in the eye. I needed to say it out loud. I needed to make it real. "They didn't deny it," I said. "They redirected it." "What?" "My parents," I said. "They are the beneficiaries. They changed the policy 7 months ago. They forged my signature." Ethan stared at me, his mouth opening slightly. "Viv, that's insane. That's a felony." $160,000, I said. The number felt heavy on my tongue. "That is what they get. That is what my life is worth to them. 160,000, I laughed. A short, sharp sound that frightened a woman sitting nearby. That is why they hung up. Ethan, they put their names on my money. Ethan grabbed my shoulders. His grip was firm. Okay, stop. Listen to me. He steered me toward the door, away from the staring eyes of the customers. We stepped out onto the sidewalk. The city noise rushed back in, cars, sirens, wind. It felt grounding. We are not going back to my place yet, Ethan said. His voice was hard, decisive. We need a lawyer. We need one right now, today. I looked at him. The grief that had been drowning me for 3 days, the sorrow of losing my photos and my clothes and my sanctuary, began to recede in its place. Something else was flowing in. It was hot and sharp. It was the same feeling I had when I looked at the fire, but focused. It was clarity. Yes, I said. A lawyer. And not a nice one, Ethan added. We need a shark. I nodded. The pain was still there. But it had changed. It wasn't an ache anymore. It was fuel. We walked to his car. I got into the passenger seat and buckled my seatbelt. As Ethan started the engine, I pulled out my phone. I stared at the screen. I pulled up the text thread with Denise. The last message was from 2 months ago, a generic birthday wish from me to her. I typed. My fingers were steady now. Mom, I am at the insurance office. They are asking some really strange questions about the policy updates. Do you know anything about this? I hesitated for a second. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to type in all caps. I wanted to tell her I knew she was a thief and a liar. But I didn't. I needed them to think I was still confused. I needed them to think I was the victim, the distressed daughter they had planned for. I pressed send, delivered. I watched the screen. I knew she was near her phone. She was always near her phone. 1 minute passed. 2 minutes. Nothing. No. What questions? No. Is everything okay? No. Call me. Just silence. The silence of a gambler waiting to see if their bet paid off. Drive, I said to Ethan. He pulled out into traffic. I watched the Harborstone building disappear in the rearview mirror. I touched the folded paper in my pocket. They wanted a tragedy. They wanted a helpless daughter. They wanted a payout. I looked at the gray sky and made a silent promise to the charred remains of my apartment. They were going to get a fight instead. The coffee shop Caleb Rourke chose was in a strip mall 3 towns over, far enough from the blackened skeleton of my apartment building that the air didn't smell like wet ash. It was a nondescript place with flickering fluorescent lights and laminate tables that felt sticky no matter how much the staff wiped them down. I sat in the back booth, my hands wrapped around a paper cup of black tea that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. Across from me, Caleb Rourke looked less like a civil servant and more like a man who had seen too many things burn. He was in his late 40s, with close-cropped gray hair and eyes that were intensely, unsettlingly observant. He didn't wear a uniform. He wore a heavy canvas jacket and boots that looked like they had kicked through hell and back. He didn't make small talk. He didn't ask if I was holding up okay. He just placed a tablet on the table between us. Screen down. Ms. Ortiz, he said. His voice was like gravel, low and scraping. I am going to be direct with you because I don't have time to dance around feelings. I have been investigating structural fires for 20 years. I know what an accident looks like. I know what a grease fire looks like. I know what a frayed extension cord looks like. He paused, holding my gaze. I don't think this was an accident. The words hung in the air, competing with the hum of the refrigerator unit behind the counter. I felt a cold prickle run down my spine, a sensation that was becoming alarmingly familiar over the last 48 hours. You think it was arson? I said. It wasn't a question. Caleb flipped the tablet over. I deal in evidence, not guesses. Let me show you what I found. The screen displayed a high-resolution photo of a charred corner of a room. It took me a moment to recognize it. It was the space between my vintage credenza and the wall, a spot I rarely looked at because it was usually hidden by the bulk of the furniture. This is the point of origin, Caleb said, tapping the screen with a thick finger. The fire didn't start in the kitchen. It didn't start in the bedroom. It started here, behind a heavy piece of wooden furniture, directly at the wall outlet. An electrical short? I asked, leaning in. The wiring in that building was old. That is what I thought at first, Caleb said. He swiped to the next photo. It was a close-up of the outlet. The plastic faceplate was melted into a distorted scream, but the metal box inside was relatively intact. But look at the burn pattern. In an electrical fire, you usually see arcing marks on the wires inside the wall. The heat comes from the inside out. Here, the heat came from the outside in. He looked at me, his expression grim. The wires inside the wall were fine. Ms. Ortiz, the fire started at the plug. Specifically, it started with something that was plugged into it, and it burned hot, too hot for just a lamp or a charger. I stared at the blackened mess on the screen. I didn't have anything plugged in there. That outlet is hard to reach. I haven't used it in months. Exactly, Caleb said. There was no appliance remnants found. Whatever was plugged in there was small, plastic, and completely consumed. But we found traces of accelerant markers in the floorboards directly underneath. Not gasoline, something cleaner, something that burns away almost completely. He leaned back, crossing his arms over his chest. This implies a device, something designed to ignite after a delay, something that was set, left, and activated. I felt the blood drain from my face. A delay, a timer. The fire alarm log shows the first sensor trip at 2:58 in the morning, Caleb continued. That is a very specific time. It ensures the occupant is asleep. It ensures maximum response time for the department because the roads are empty, but it also ensures maximum destruction before anyone notices the smoke. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper that was louder than a shout. So here is the question, Ms. Ortiz, and I need you to think very carefully before you answer. Who had access to your apartment in the week leading up to the fire? I swallowed hard. My throat felt dry as dust. I live alone, I said. I know. I have a key. The leasing office has a master key. We are already auditing the management's key logs, Caleb said. Who else? I looked at the table. I saw the scratch marks in the laminate. I saw the history of 1,000 nervous coffees. 4 days before the fire, I said, my voice trembling. My mother visited. Caleb didn't blink. He didn't write it down. He just watched me. Your mother, Denise Mallory? Yes. Does she have a key? No. I let her in. But I hesitated. The memory of Denise walking around my apartment, touching things, looking behind the furniture, came rushing back. Do you use the timer often? She had asked. But what? Caleb pressed. She was there for about 20 minutes, I said. Maybe 30. She walked around. She looked at the outlets. She made comments about my electronics. And I left her alone in the living room for a moment to go to the bathroom. Caleb's eyes narrowed slightly. Was she near the credenza? Yes, I whispered. She was looking at the pictures on top of it. Caleb picked up the tablet and turned the screen off. The reflection of my own pale, terrified face stared back at me. We will be pulling the building's access logs and the security camera footage from the lobby and the elevators, Caleb said. If she brought something in, or if she acted suspiciously, the cameras usually catch it. People think they are invisible when they are in a hallway. But the lens doesn't blink. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a card, sliding it across the table. I am opening a formal arson file, he said. If you remember anything else, anything at all, no matter how small, you call me. Do not talk to the police yet. Talk to me. I build the science. They build the case. If the science is solid, the case holds. I took the card. Thank you. One more thing, Caleb said, standing up. If this was family, be careful. People who burn buildings down to solve a problem don't stop when the fire goes out. He left me sitting there, the cold tea sweating condensation onto the table. I sat there for a long time. My mind was racing, connecting dots I desperately didn't want to connect. The insurance policy update, the forged signature, the fire. The origin point behind the cabinet Denise was standing next to. It wasn't just greed. It was violence. I needed to know. I needed to hear her voice. I needed to see if she would slip. I picked up my phone. My hands were shaking, but I forced them to be steady. I dialed Denise's number. It rang 3 times. Hello? Her voice was casual. Breezy, even, as if she hadn't left her daughter homeless 3 days ago, as if she hadn't signed a death warrant on my apartment. Hi, Mom, I said. I forced my voice to sound tired, broken, but not accusatory. I channeled the version of Vivian they wanted, the distressed, confused victim. Vivian, she said. There was a slight pause. How are you? Did you find a place to stay? I'm staying with a coworker, I said. It's okay. Listen, Mom, I am trying to fill out some paperwork for the fire department. Just routine stuff to close the file. Oh? Her tone sharpened instantly. What kind of paperwork? Just a timeline, I lied. They want to know everyone who was in the apartment for the last week, just to rule out accidental interference. I was writing down your visit. Do you remember exactly how long you were there? Was it an hour? An hour? Denise laughed. But it was a nervous, high-pitched sound. No, definitely not. I was barely there. I just popped in to drop off. To see you, 20 minutes, maybe 30 tops. Okay, 20 to 30 minutes, I repeated, pretending to write it down. And you didn't move anything, right? Like, move any furniture or plug anything in to charge your phone? Vivian, what is this? Denise snapped. The breeziness was gone. Why are you asking me these questions? I told you. The investigator asked me to… Investigator? Denise cut me off. The words seemed to explode out of her. You are talking to an investigator? Well, yeah. There was a fire. Mom, they investigate fires. You shouldn't be talking to anyone, Denise said, her voice dropping to a hiss. You are in shock. You are traumatized. You don't know what you are saying. These people, Vivian, they try to pin things on the tenant. They try to say you left a candle on or you were negligent so they don't have to pay. He seemed nice, I said, baiting the hook. He just asked about access. Don't talk to him again, Denise commanded. Do not say a word to him. You need a lawyer before you talk to anyone like that. They twist words. They will make it look like it is your fault. Why would I need a lawyer if I didn't do anything wrong? I asked innocently. Because the system is corrupt, she shouted. Then she caught herself. She took a breath. I am just looking out for you. Vivi, you are not in a right state of mind. Just stop answering their calls. Tell them to talk to Frank if they need anything. Okay, Mom, I said softly. I will keep that in mind. Good. Now get some rest. You sound exhausted. She hung up. I lowered the phone. The air in the coffee shop felt freezing. You shouldn't be talking to anyone. You are not in a right state of mind. She hadn't asked if I was hurt. She hadn't asked if the investigator found the cause. She hadn't asked if I lost anything valuable. She had panicked. There is a rule in human psychology I learned from reading too many crime novels, but it turned out to be true. Innocent people ask, "What happened?" Guilty people ask, "What did you say?" Denise was terrified, not for me, for herself. I finished the cold tea in one gulp, the bitter taste matching the feeling in my stomach. I had my answer. Caleb had the science. I had the behavior. I walked back to Ethan's apartment as the sun began to set, casting long, bruised purple shadows across the snow. I felt heavy, burdened by a truth that was too big to carry alone. When I got to Ethan's, he was still at work, but he had left a key for me. I let myself in, grateful for the silence. I sat down on the couch and opened my laptop. I needed to check my work email. I had been neglecting my clients for 3 days, and I needed to send out a few apologies for missed deadlines. I opened my inbox. There was a new email at the top. It wasn't from a client. It was from the Human Resources Department at Bright Crest Media. The subject line was simply, "Urgent. Meeting request. My heart gave a painful thump. HR never emailed at 7 in the evening. I clicked it open. Dear Vivian, we hope this email finds you well. We understand you are going through a difficult personal transition regarding your housing situation. However, we have received a concerning anonymous report regarding your current well-being and its potential impact on your professional conduct. The report raised specific concerns about your mental state and stability following the incident. Given the sensitive nature of our client work, we need to schedule a formal fitness for duty meeting tomorrow at 10 in the morning to discuss how we can support you and to determine if a leave of absence is necessary. Please confirm your attendance. Regards, Sarah Jenkins, HR Director. I stared at the screen, my vision blurring. An anonymous report concerning my mental state. Denise, she wasn't just waiting for the insurance money. She was actively ensuring I fit the profile of the distressed beneficiary. If I lost my job, if I was painted as unstable, if I had a breakdown, it would validate the clause in the forged document. It would prove that I was incapable of managing my own finances. She was dismantling my life, brick by brick, first my home, now my career. I felt a surge of rage so pure it almost made me dizzy. It wasn't the hot, panicked fear of the fire anymore. It was cold. It was calculating. They wanted me to break. They wanted me to crumble so they could sweep in. Save me and pocket the cash. I hit reply on the email. Dear Sarah, I will be there at 10. Vivian. I closed the laptop with a snap. I wasn't going to crumble. I was going to fight. And if Denise thought she could burn me down and then gaslight me into the ashes, she was about to learn that she had missed one very important thing. Fire doesn't just destroy, it hardens. The morning sun did not bring relief. It brought a notification from my Aunt Linda. Linda was Denise's younger sister, a woman who specialized in aggressive sympathy. We had not spoken in 6 months, not since Thanksgiving. Yet at 7:30 in the morning, my phone buzzed with her name. I sat at Ethan's kitchen table, staring at the screen. The coffee in my mug was black and bitter, exactly what I needed to shock my system into alertness. I pressed answer. Vivian, honey, Linda's voice washed over the line, dripping with a sugary, suffocating concern. I heard what, Aunt Linda? I asked, keeping my voice steady. About the fire, she said, lowering her volume as if speaking about a shameful disease. And about the rest of it. Denise called me last night. She was in tears. Vivian, absolute tears. I gripped the mug tighter. Why was she crying, Linda? Did she tell you she hung up on me when I was standing on the curb? Oh, sweetie, see? This is what she was talking about, Linda said, her tone shifting from pity to a gentle, patronizing correction. She said you were spiraling. She said you were making up stories about them not helping. She said you were hysterical, accusing everyone of plotting against you. My stomach turned over. It was a masterclass in narrative control. Denise knew I might talk. She knew I might tell the family that she and Frank had abandoned me. So, she struck first. She painted me as the unreliable narrator, the traumatized daughter losing her grip on reality. I am not spiraling, I said, cold and precise. I am homeless because my apartment burned down. That is a fact. And when I called for help, Frank told me it wasn't their problem. That is also a fact. Shh. It's okay, Linda coothed, ignoring my words entirely. Trauma does strange things to the memory. Honey, Denise is just worried you might do something rash. She mentioned you were talking about lawyers and investigators. Vivian, you need to rest. You don't need to be lashing out at the people who love you. They don't love me, I said. They love my life insurance policy. There was a pause, a heavy, loaded silence. Oh, Vivian, Linda sighed, and I could practically hear her shaking her head. You sound just like your father when he went off his meds. Please, just stop talking crazy. We are all praying for you. She hung up. I put the phone down. My hands were trembling. Not from fear, but from a rage so hot it felt like it could boil the coffee in my cup. This was the strategy. Isolate the victim, discredit the witness. By the time I tried to tell the truth, I would just be the crazy daughter ranting against her saintly mother. Ethan walked into the kitchen, dressed for work, but looking tired. He saw my face. "Bad?" he asked. "Calculated," I replied. "She is poisoning the well. She is telling everyone I am having a mental breakdown." Ethan poured himself a cup of coffee. "That explains the email to HR. "Exactly," I said. "If I lose my job, I lose my credibility, I lose my income, I become exactly what she needs me to be. A dependent, unstable mess who needs a guardian to manage her finances." "Then we don't let that happen," Ethan said firmly. "We have the meeting at 10. We are going to be ready." We spent the next hour turning his dining table into a war room. Ethan helped me print out a timeline of events, stripping away the emotional language and leaving only hard data. February 3rd, 2:58 in the morning. Fire alarm activated. February 3rd, 3:10 in the morning. Phone call to parents. Duration 45 seconds. February 4th. Contacted insurance provider. February 5th. Contacted fire investigator. "Do not record the meeting with HR," Ethan advised, as he handed me a fresh notebook. "Colorado is a one-party consent state, but company policy usually forbids unauthorized recording on premises. If they catch you, they can fire you for cause, and then the narrative that you are paranoid wins. Just take notes, detailed, verbatim notes. Ask them to repeat things. It makes them nervous." I nodded, tucking the timeline into my bag. "I need a lawyer. Ethan, before I go to HR, I need to know I have a shield." "I found one," Ethan said. "Sloan Hart. She specializes in insurance, bad faith, and fraud. Her office is downtown. I sent her a summary of your situation this morning while you were in the shower. She can see you at 8:45, before your HR meeting." "You are amazing," I said, feeling a sudden surge of gratitude that almost brought tears to my eyes. "Save it," Ethan said, grabbing his keys. "Let's go get your life back." Sloan Hart's office was not like the beige purgatory of Harborstone Assurance. It was located in a restored brick building in the Lodo district. With high ceilings and exposed beams, the waiting room was silent and minimalist, with sharp angles and modern art that looked like it could cut you. Sloan herself was a woman made of steel and geometry. She was perhaps 40, with a sharp bob cut so precise it looked laser-measured. She wore a tailored suit that cost more than my car, and her handshake was firm, dry, and brief. "Ms. Ortiz," she said, gesturing to the chair opposite her glass desk. "I read the summary. You have a fire, a rejected plea for help, and a forged beneficiary form." "Yes," I said, sitting down. I pulled the folded photocopy of the insurance document from my pocket and slid it across the desk. "This is the copy the agent gave me." Sloan put on a pair of thin-rimmed reading glasses. She didn't just look at the paper. She dissected it. Her eyes scanned the text, then settled on the signature at the bottom. She opened a drawer and pulled out a magnifying glass, an old-school tool in a high-tech office. She leaned in, hovering over the blue ink of the photocopy. "Do you have a sample of your actual signature?" she asked without looking up. I signed my name on a notepad she pushed toward me. Sloan compared the two. For a long minute, the only sound in the room was the hum of the city outside. "It is a good forgery," she said finally, sitting back. "Very good. The slant is correct. The pressure points on the downstrokes are consistent with your natural hand." My heart sank. "So I can't prove it isn't me?" "I didn't say that," Sloan said, a shark-like smile touching her lips. "I said it was good. I didn't say it was perfect." She tapped the photocopy with a manicured nail. "See here? On the loop of the O in Ortiz? And here, on the cross of the T? There are microscopic hesitations, ink blobs. We call them hesitation marks. When you sign your own name, it is muscle memory. You do it in one fluid motion. When someone forges a name, their brain has to process the shape as they draw it. They pause, just for a fraction of a millisecond, to check their work. The pen stops moving, but the ink keeps flowing. It creates these tiny pools. She looked at me, her eyes cold and intelligent. This wasn't signed. It was drawn. A forensic handwriting analyst will tear this apart in court. I felt a weight lift off my chest, massive and suffocating. So we can stop them? We can do more than stop them, Sloane said. We can bury them, but we need the chain of custody. She pulled a legal pad toward her and started writing, her pen scratching loudly across the paper. I am going to draft a preservation letter to Harborstone immediately. We are demanding the preservation of the surveillance footage from the lobby, the elevator, and the agent's desk for July 15th. We want the metadata from the computer that processed the form. We want the employment records of the notary who stamped this. We want to know exactly what ID was presented. She looked up. If your mother walked into that office pretending to be you, she left a digital footprint. Cameras don't lie. And if she used a fake ID, or if the notary was negligent, Harborstone is on the hook for massive liability. What about the HR meeting? I asked. I have to be at Brightcrest in an hour. They got an anonymous tip that I am unstable. Sloane's expression darkened. The smear campaign. Classic. They want to delegitimize you before the fraud comes to light. She ripped the page off the legal pad and handed it to me. Go to that meeting. Be calm. Be boring. Do not get angry. Do not cry. Hand them this card. She handed me her business card. Heavy stock. Black with silver lettering. Tell them that you are currently cooperating with a criminal arson investigation and that you have retained counsel regarding identity theft related to the incident. Tell them that the anonymous tip is likely harassment from the suspect in the investigation. Suspect? I asked. Caleb hasn't named a suspect yet. I am naming the suspect, Sloane said. To HR, you are not a crazy woman. You are the victim of a serious crime who is handling it with legal support. HR departments are terrified of liability. Ms. Ortiz, if they fire a victim of a crime because the criminal called in a tip, they are opening themselves up to a wrongful termination lawsuit. I took the card. I felt like she had just handed me a loaded gun. Thank you, Sloane. Don't thank me yet, she said, turning back to her computer. Retainers are $5,000. I will take a payment plan given your situation, but we are going to win this, and then your mother is going to pay my fees. Now go. Be a statue. Brightcrest Media was a hive of open-plan anxiety. Phones rang, keyboards clattered, and people ran around with coffees, pretending that marketing deadlines were matters of life and death. I walked through the familiar rows of desks, keeping my head high. I could feel eyes on me. Had they heard? Had the rumors spread? I walked into the HR conference room at exactly 10 o'clock. Sarah Jenkins, the HR director, was sitting at the head of the table. Next to her was a man I didn't recognize, likely from the legal department. Vivian, Sarah said, her voice tight. Please, sit down. I sat. I placed my notebook on the table. I placed my pen next to it. I placed Sloane Hart's business card in the center. We wanted to meet with you to discuss. Sarah glanced at the legal guy. To discuss your fitness for duty. We have received reports that you have been exhibiting erratic behavior following the fire. Reports from whom? I asked calmly. We cannot disclose the source, Sarah said, but the concerns were specific regarding paranoia and emotional volatility. I opened my notebook. I wrote the date and time. Sarah, I said, my voice steady, channeling the cold precision of Sloane Hart. I understand you have a job to do, but I need you to understand the context. 3 days ago, my apartment was destroyed in a fire. There is currently an active arson investigation led by the fire department. Sarah blinked. Arson? Yes. In the process of this investigation, it has come to light that I am also the victim of significant identity theft and insurance fraud. The anonymous source who contacted you is likely the individual currently being investigated for these crimes. This is a harassment tactic designed to discredit a witness. The legal guy picked up Sloane's card. He looked at it. then looked at me with new respect. "Sloane Hart is your representation?" he asked. "She is," I said. "She is handling the fraud case. I am fully capable of performing my job duties. I am not manic. I am not paranoid. I am a victim of a crime who is systematically documenting the evidence." I looked Sarah in the eye. "I would hate for Brightcrest Media to become an unwitting participant in a harassment campaign against one of its own employees." The room went silent. The air pressure shifted. I wasn't the trembling girl in the fire anymore. I was a liability they needed to manage, but not in the way Denise had hoped. "I see," Sarah said, clearing her throat. She looked at the legal guy. He gave a microscopic nod. "Well, Vivian," Sarah said, her tone shifting from disciplinary to cautious. "Thank you for that context. That certainly changes things. We want to support you. Perhaps we can just monitor the situation for now? We won't take any formal action today." "That sounds appropriate," I said. "I will keep you updated on the investigation as allowed by my attorney." I walked out of that meeting 10 minutes later. My legs were shaking, but my face was stone. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. The bags under my eyes were dark, but the eyes themselves were clear. I had survived the first wave. Denise had tried to bury me under a mountain of shame and rumors, hoping I would suffocate. She hoped I would get fired, run out of money, and disappear. But she had made a mistake. She had pushed me into a corner, and in that corner, I found weapons I didn't know I had. I walked back to my desk and sat down. I opened my work email. I started typing a response to a client. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It wasn't about the $160,000. It was about the fact that my mother had looked at my life, my career, my reputation, my sanity, and decided it was all flammable. She was willing to burn down my history to buy herself a future. I typed a sentence, then deleted it. The anger was settling into something heavier, something permanent. It was grief, yes, but it was also a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't going to let her win. I wasn't going to let her verify her own narrative. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Ethan. "How did it go?" I typed back, "I am still here, and I hired the shark." I put the phone down and got back to work. Outside the window, the city was gray and cold, but inside, the fire was no longer destroying me. It was fueling me. The temporary office of the property management team was a beige construction trailer sitting awkwardly in the far corner of the parking lot, surrounded by melting snow and the smell of wet charcoal. Inside, the air was stale, smelling of cheap coffee and anxiety. I sat on a folding metal chair next to Caleb Rourke. Across from us, Dalton Reyes, the building manager, typed a password into a laptop with trembling fingers. He looked like a man who hadn't slept since the alarms went off. His eyes were red-rimmed, and he kept glancing at Caleb's badge as if it were a radioactive isotope. "I pulled everything you asked for," Dalton said, his voice thin. "The main entrance, the service elevator, the hallway feed for the 5th floor, it is all backed up to the cloud, so the fire didn't touch the data." "Good," Caleb said. He didn't lean forward. He didn't look eager. He looked like a predator waiting for a rabbit to break cover. "Let's start with January 30th, the Friday before the fire. Start at 5 in the afternoon." Dalton clicked a file. The large monitor on the wall flickered to life. It was strange to see my building intact. The screen showed the lobby, clean and bright, with its faux marble floors and the pot of fake orchids on the concierge desk. It looked so normal. It was a ghost story in reverse, seeing the body before it died. "Fast forward," Caleb commanded. "Get to 6:30. The timestamp in the corner of the screen blurred as the footage sped up. People zipped by like insects. Then, Caleb raised a hand. "Stop. Back it up 30 seconds. Dalton tapped a key. The video slowed to real time. 6:42 in the evening. The automatic doors slid open. A woman walked in. Even in the grainy black and white footage, I knew her walk. It was a distinctive gait, a mix of purpose and performance. Head held high, shoulders back. That is her, I whispered. My throat felt tight. That is Denise. She was wearing the wide-brimmed hat she had worn in the insurance office, pulled low. Large sunglasses covered her eyes. But what froze my blood wasn't her disguise. It was what she was carrying, in her right hand. Denise was gripping the handle of a large, heavy black bag. It looked like a gym duffel, but structured, sagging at the bottom as if something dense and blocky was inside. She doesn't go to the gym, I said, pointing at the screen. She has bad knees. She never carries luggage like that. Caleb didn't speak. He just watched, on the screen. Denise stopped in the middle of the lobby. She didn't go straight to the elevators. She stood there, turning her head slowly from left to right. She was scanning the room, checking for neighbors, checking for the concierge. The lobby was empty. She moved toward the elevators. Switch to the 5th floor hallway, Caleb said. Dalton clicked another file. The perspective changed. We were looking down the long, carpeted corridor of my floor. My door, number 502, was visible at the far end. At 6:45, the elevator doors opened. Denise stepped out. She was still holding the bag. She walked down the hall, but she walked close to the wall, keeping her head down. She reached my door. She didn't knock. She stood there for a moment, looking back toward the elevator, checking one last time. Then, the footage showed me opening the door. I looked small on the screen, tired, wearing my work clothes. I stepped back to let her in. Denise entered. The heavy black bag bumped against the door frame as she passed. The door closed. Okay, Caleb said. Now we wait. She told you she was there for 20 or 30 minutes, right? Yes, I said. She was adamant about it. Dalton, speed it up. Let's see when she leaves. The timestamp began to race again. 7 o'clock. The door stayed closed. 7:30. The door stayed closed. 8 o'clock. 8:30. I stared at the screen, a cold knot forming in my stomach. I remembered that night. I had been in the bathroom for a while, taking a shower, getting ready for bed. I had been in the bedroom answering emails. I thought she had left earlier. I thought she had let herself out while I was drying my hair. She had yelled goodbye from the living room, but the camera didn't lie. 9 o'clock, 9:15, 9:30. She was in there for almost 3 hours, Caleb said, his voice flat. 3 hours? I didn't know, I stammered. I was in the back. The apartment is long. I had headphones on for part of it. I thought she was gone. 3 hours gives a person a lot of time to work, Caleb murmured. Then, at 9:38, my door opened again. Denise stepped out. She adjusted her hat. She looked left. She looked right. She walked toward the elevator, and she was empty-handed. I blinked. I leaned closer to the screen. Where is the bag? I asked. Her hands were swinging freely at her sides. She adjusted her coat. She pressed the elevator button. The black duffel bag was gone. Switch to the service exit, Caleb barked. Maybe she dropped it down the chute or took the stairs. Dalton scrambled to switch feeds. We watched the service door. We watched the stairwell exit. Nothing. Denise appeared in the lobby again at 9:40. She walked out the front door. She had her purse, a small clutch tucked under her arm, but the heavy black bag was nowhere to be seen. It never left the building, Caleb said. He turned to me, his eyes hard. The bag stayed in the apartment. The silence in the trailer was deafening. I felt like the floor was tilting. She brought it in, I whispered. She left it there. If that bag contained clothes or books, she would have mentioned it, Caleb reasoned. If it was a gift, you would have seen it, but you didn't see it, did you? No, I never saw that bag. I didn't even know she brought it in. Because she hid it, Caleb said. She spent 3 hours inside. She waited for you to be distracted. She tucked that bag somewhere you wouldn't look, behind the sofa, under the bed in the guest room, or maybe behind the heavy wooden credenza where the fire started. He stood up and walked to the screen, tracing the path of my mother's image with his finger. That bag wasn't luggage, Vivian. It was a Trojan horse. It carried the fuel. It carried the device. I felt sick. physically violent nausea. My mother had walked into my home, hugged me, asked about my life, and all the while, she had planted a bomb in my living room. She had sat on my couch, knowing that a few feet away, a bag was waiting to destroy everything I owned. "Can you zoom in on the bag?" Caleb asked. "When she walks in?" Dalton zoomed in. The image pixelated, but the shape was clear. It was heavy. It had structure. "That is not clothes," Caleb noted. "See how it pulls on her shoulder? That is dense weight, maybe 2 or 3 gallons of fluid, or packed solid material." He turned away from the screen. "That is enough for a warrant. We have her entering with a package and leaving without it. We have the origin of the fire coinciding with a hidden location, but we need to know what was in it." As if on cue, Caleb's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, looked at the screen, and his eyebrows shot up. "Speak of the devil," he muttered. "It is the lab." He put the phone to his ear. "Rourke here. Go ahead." I watched him. He listened intently, his eyes fixed on the frozen image of my mother. Yeah, I see. A timer? You are sure? Mechanical or digital?" He paused. "Plastic housing, melted into the floorboards. Okay, what about the accelerant? No gasoline? Clean burn?" He nodded, pacing the small length of the trailer. "Okay, get me the serial number on that component. Yes, I know it is damaged. Use the microscope. I need the batch number." He hung up. He looked at me, and the expression on his face was one of grim satisfaction. "We got lucky," he said. "The fire burned hot, but it burned up. The floor beneath the origin point was shielded just enough by the pooling plastic of the device itself. The lab found a clump of fused debris." "What was it?" I asked. "Parts of a heavy-duty plug-in timer," Caleb said. "The kind you use for outdoor lights or heavy appliances. And surrounding it, traces of a paraffin-based starter. Slow burn, high heat, hard to detect because it doesn't smell like gas." "A timer," I repeated. "She asked me about timers. She asked if I used them." "She was checking to see if you would notice one," Caleb said. "She plugged it in behind the credenza. She set it for, 3 days later? 4 days? Some of these digital ones can be programmed for a 7-day cycle." "It went off on Tuesday morning," I said. "She visited on Friday." 4 days, Caleb calculated. She set it to trigger in the middle of the night. 4 days later, long enough to distance herself, long enough for her to be seen at home, sleeping in her own bed, while your apartment turned into an oven. He looked at his phone again. A text message had just come through. "The lab tech is good," Caleb said. He pulled a partial batch number off the timer's internal circuit board. "It is a specific brand. Guardian Home Control." He tapped the screen. "Searching. Let's see where these are sold in the area." I watched him work. My mind was reeling. A timer. She had programmed a machine to burn me out. It was so impersonal, so cold. She had touched a button, set a time, and walked away. "Here we go," Caleb said. "This batch was shipped to 3 distributors in Colorado. One is in Denver, one is in Boulder, and one," he looked up at me, "is at Redwood Home and Hardware, in Aurora." "Aurora," I whispered. "That is 10 minutes from where Denise lives." "It gets better," Caleb said. "Redwood is a smaller chain. They keep detailed inventory logs, and they have excellent security cameras at the checkout counters." He put the phone away. "I am going to Redwood," he said. "I am going to pull their sales records for the week before the fire. If I find a transaction for a Guardian timer in a paraffin log, and if I see your mother's face on their camera buying it—" My brain snapped. A memory, small and insignificant until this very moment, exploded in my head like a firework. "Wait," I said. I grabbed Caleb's arm. He stopped. "What?" "Last week," I said, my voice shaking. 2 days before she visited me. We were on the phone. She was complaining about the weather, and she mentioned she had been running errands." "What kind of errands?" Caleb asked. "She said she had to go to the hardware store," I said, the memory sharpening. "She said Frank wanted to fix the deck. She said—" I spent an hour at Redwood looking for brackets. I looked at Caleb. She told me, I whispered. She told me she was at Redwood. She even complained about the line. Caleb stared at me. She placed herself at the scene of the purchase. She didn't think I would remember, I said. It was just noise, just small talk. She was buying the things to burn my house down, and she complained to me about the checkout line while she was doing it. The cruelty of it took my breath away. It wasn't just a crime, it was a mockery. She had been holding the weapon in her hand, talking to the victim, and I hadn't even heard the click of the safety coming off. That is it, Caleb said. That is the link. The video puts the bag in your apartment. The lab puts the timer in the fire. The store records will put the timer in her hand. He looked at the frozen image of Denise on the wall one last time. The woman in the hat. My mother. She kept the receipt, Caleb guessed. People like this, they are arrogant, but they are also bureaucratic. She probably kept the receipt to claim it as a home improvement expense on her taxes, or she threw it in her trash can. He turned to Dalton. I am taking these files. I need them on a secure drive. Now. Dalton nodded. Scrambling to comply, I stood up. My legs felt heavy, but my mind was clear. The image of the black bag was burned into my retinas. She had carried it like a burden. She had walked into my home. She had smiled. She had used my bathroom. She had planted it. And then she had left. Lighter. Hands free. Leaving death behind her furniture. The camera doesn't blink, I whispered to myself. Repeating what Caleb had said earlier. Denise thought she was invisible. She thought she was smarter than everyone else. She thought a fire would consume the truth along with my furniture, but she forgot that we live in a world of glass eyes. The lobby camera saw her. The hallway camera saw her. The hardware store camera saw her. And now, I saw her, truly saw her. Not as a difficult mother, not as a narcissist, but as a predator who would watch her own child burn for a check. Caleb turned to me. Are you okay to drive? I have to go to the hardware store right now. I am fine, I lied. Go. Get the footage. Vivian, he said, pausing at the door. This is going to get ugly. Once we have the store footage, we are going to arrest her. Are you ready for that? I looked at the screen where my mother stood, forever frozen in the act of betrayal. She didn't hesitate, I said. Why should I? Caleb nodded and stepped out into the cold parking lot. I stayed for a moment longer. I walked up to the screen. I looked at the black bag. What is in the bag, Mom? I asked the silent image. I knew the answer. My future was in that bag. My freedom was in that bag. Because that bag was the evidence that would lock her away and finally set me free. I turned my back on her and walked out of the trailer. The air outside was freezing, but for the first time in days. I didn't feel the cold. I felt the heat of the bridge I was about to burn, and this time, I would be the one holding the match. 3 days later, the atmosphere in Sloan Hart's office had shifted. The cool, detached minimalism was still there, but the energy was kinetic. Papers were stacked high on the glass desk, and for the first time, Sloan looked less like a corporate shark and more like a hunter who had just scented blood in the water. We have the statement, Sloan said the moment I walked in. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. She slid a document across the desk. It was an affidavit, notarized and stamped. I sat down, picking up the paper. It was the testimony of the insurance clerk who had processed the fraudulent beneficiary change 7 months ago. Her name was Brenda Miller. Read the highlighted section, Sloan instructed, leaning back in her chair, a pencil tapping rhythmically against her chin. I looked at the paragraph Sloan had marked in yellow. I recall the interaction clearly because the customer seemed agitated. She was a middle-aged woman, well-dressed but wearing a large hat and sunglasses indoors. When I asked her to remove the sunglasses for the photo ID check, she claimed she had a severe eye infection and was sensitive to the light. She presented the ID of Vivian Ortiz. When I asked why she was making such significant changes to the policy in person rather than online, She stated that she was handling the paperwork for her daughter because her daughter was too busy with her career to manage these details, and that she, as the mother, was just ensuring everything was in order. I felt a cold flush of anger. She used my career against me, even in the lie. She had to make a dig. "Keep reading," Sloan said. "The identification part. I presented a standard 6-person photo lineup to Mrs. Miller this morning. She identified photograph number 3 immediately. She stated she was 90% sure based on the jawline and the hair color. But she was 100% sure about the scent. The woman in the office was wearing a very heavy, distinctive perfume. Mrs. Miller described it as smelling like powdery gardenias and musk. I dropped the paper. Estee Lauder. Beautiful. Excuse me? That is her perfume, I said. The scent practically phantom-filling the room. She has worn it since 1995. She practically bathes in it. You can smell her coming from down the hall. Sloan nodded, making a note. Olfactory memory is extremely strong in witness testimony. It anchors the identification, but we didn't stop there. She turned her monitor around so I could see the screen. Harborstone finally released the lobby security footage from July 15th. It took a subpoena threat, but they coughed it up. The video played. It was high definition, much clearer than the grainy footage from my apartment building. I watched as a woman walked into the insurance branch. She was wearing the wide-brimmed hat Brenda Miller had described, and oversized sunglasses that covered half her face. She walked with a brisk, authoritative clip. "Look at her wrist," Sloan said, pausing the video. She zoomed in. The image was slightly blurry, but the glint of gold was unmistakable. It was a heavy gold bangle with a twisted rope design and a small dangling charm shaped like a heart. I stopped breathing for a second. "I gave her that," I whispered. "For her 50th birthday. It is 14-karat gold. I spent 3 months saving for it. Are you sure it is the same one?" "I had it engraved," I said, my voice thick. "On the inside of the heart, it says, 'To Mom, love V.' If you get the police to seize that jewelry box, you will find it." Sloan sat back, a satisfied expression sharpening her features. "That connects the suspect to the scene. We have the witness identification, the scent, and the physical object, the bracelet, visible on camera. Combined with the handwriting analysis that shows forgery, we have a solid case for insurance fraud and identity theft." "So we can arrest her?" I asked. "Right now?" "We could," Sloan said, "but I advise against it." I looked at her, stunned. "Why?" "She stole my identity. She set me up. Because if we arrest her for fraud now, she makes bail in 24 hours, Sloan explained, her voice dropping to a strategic low. "She gets a lawyer, she shuts up, she destroys any other evidence she has, and most importantly, she gets alerted that we are looking at her. We don't just want her for fraud. Vivian, we want her for arson. We want the full weight of the law to crush her so she never gets out." She leaned forward. "This is a chess game. Right now, she thinks she is winning. She thinks you are the hysterical, paranoid daughter and she is the concerned mother. If we strike now, we only take a pawn. We want the queen. We need to wait until the fire investigation is airtight. We need to link the fraud to the fire in a way that shows premeditation for murder." "Don't startle the snake," I murmured. "Exactly," Sloan said. "Let her get comfortable. Let her think her plan is working. People get sloppy when they think they are safe." I nodded slowly. It made sense. But the thought of letting Denise walk around free, thinking she had outsmarted me, made my skin crawl. "We have help on the arson side," Sloan added. "Your investigator, Caleb Rourke, he sent over the digital access logs from your apartment building." She pulled another file. "The electronic lock on the front door of your building records every key fob entry. We cross-referenced the log with the video footage. The fob used to enter your building on the night of the fire, and on the day of the visit was a guest fob assigned to Unit 502. I only have 2 fobs," I said. "One is on my keychain, the other is in my kitchen drawer." "Are you sure it was in the drawer?" Sloan asked. I thought back. I rarely use the spare. I kept it in the junk drawer next to the takeout menus. I assume so. Oh, Sloane suggested. Denise took it during a previous visit, or she swiped it when you weren't looking. The log shows that the guest fob was used to enter the building at 6:42 in the evening on July 14th, the day she visited you 7 months ago, and it was used again on January 30th. She has a key, I realized. Not to the apartment, but to the building. She could get into the hallway whenever she wanted. And if she could get into the hallway, Sloane said, she could pick the lock to your unit, or more likely, she made a copy of your physical key during that July visit. Did you ever leave your keys unattended? I left them on the counter when I went to the bathroom, I said, feeling sick. Her purse was right next to them. 5 minutes, Sloane said. That is all it takes to make a wax impression or just snap a photo of the key biting to get a copy cut later. She has been planning this access for months. I left Sloane's office with a heavy mandate. Do nothing. Let the woman who tried to burn me alive believe she was safe. I went back to Ethan's apartment. He was already home, sitting at his dual monitor setup, looking like a hacker from a cyberpunk movie. He had code scrolling on one screen and a spreadsheet on the other. How was the shark? He asked, spinning his chair around. Sharp, I said, dropping my bag on the sofa. We have her on the fraud. We have the witness. We have the video. But we have to wait for the arson case to catch up. Well, I might have found something to help with that, Ethan said. He gestured for me to come over. I have been digging into the how of the identity theft. It has been bugging me. How did she pass the security questions? Harborstone asks for things like previous address or amount of last utility bill. Even a mother doesn't always know that stuff. She guesses? I shrugged. No. You get locked out after 3 wrong tries, Ethan said. She got it right on the first try. So I started thinking, where is the data leak? He pointed to the screen. It was a login page for a regional electric company, referring to an old account from my very first apartment, back when I was 22. I did a background check on your digital footprint, Ethan admitted, looking a little sheepish. Legal gray area. But you are the client. I found this old utility account. It was closed 5 years ago, but the profile is still active in their archive. He clicked a tab marked Authorized Contacts. There were 2 names listed. Primary account holder, Vivian Ortiz. Secondary authorized user, Denise Mallory. I stared at the screen. I remember that. I was 22. I didn't have any credit history. The landlord required a cosigner or a secondary contact for the electricity connection. Denise offered. And you never removed her? Ethan asked. I moved out a year later. I closed the account. I didn't think I needed to remove a contact from a closed account. Here is the thing, Ethan said, his voice grim. Utility companies share data databases for credit checks. Because she was an authorized user on this account, her name is linked to your credit profile in the back-end systems. When she called Harborstone or went into their office, she could use this old authorization to prove she had a history of managing your utilities. It gives her implied consent status in some legacy systems. She planted a seed 5 years ago, I said, horrified. No, she just never let go of the leash, Ethan corrected. And she used that leash to strangle you. She likely used this old account to access your current address details, your credit report, everything. That is how she knew which insurance company you used. It is all in the credit header. We need to subpoena this, I said. We need to show she accessed this recently. Already drafted the request template for Sloane, Ethan said, tapping a file. But there is a catch. There is always a catch. We can prove she did it. We can prove how she did it. We can prove she was there, but Caleb called me while you were driving. My stomach dropped. What did he say? He said the district attorney is hesitant on the warrant for arrest, Ethan said gently. They have the how and the who, but they are stuck on the why. The money, I shouted, throwing my hands up. $160,000. Is that not enough? For a jury? Yes. For a judge to sign a warrant that destroys a middle-class woman with no prior criminal record? Maybe not, Ethan said. The DA is worried it looks circumstantial. They need a smoking gun for the financial motive. They need to know why they needed that money so desperately right now. Is it gambling? Is it drugs? Is it a secret second family? They just bought a new car, I said. A Lexus, last month. A Lexus doesn't make you burn down a building, Ethan said. There has to be something else. A debt, a threat, something that put a clock on them. I sank onto the sofa. The frustration was physically painful, like a cramp in my chest. We were so close. We had the timer. We had the forgery. We had the lies. But the law was a machine that demanded specific fuel, and we were missing a gallon. So what do? I asked. Hire a private investigator to look at their bank accounts? Sloan is doing that, Ethan said. But that takes time. Banks fight subpoenas. We need something faster. I looked at the window, watching the city lights flicker. I thought about what Sloan had said. Don't startle the snake. Let her think she is winning. Denise thinks I am crazy, I said slowly. She is telling the whole family I am paranoid and unstable. She wants to discredit me. Right, Ethan said. So what if I give her what she wants? Ethan turned in his chair. What do you mean? She needs me to be the distressed beneficiary, I said, the plan forming in my mind like ice crystals. She needs me to be unfit to manage the money. If I look competent, if I look like I'm fighting back with lawyers, she gets nervous. She covers her tracks. I stood up. But if I look broken, if I look like I'm falling apart, she will get confident. She will get greedy. And she might slip up. Vivian, that is dangerous, Ethan warned. You are playing with your own reputation. My reputation is already on fire, I said. I am going to pour gasoline on it. I am going to let her think her smear campaign is working perfectly. I am going to be the disaster she wrote the script for. I walked over to the table and picked up my phone. I am going to text her, I said. Not a lawyer text, a crazy text, something that makes her think I'm cracking. And then? And then we wait, I said. We wait for her to brag. Or we wait for her to try to collect the money because she thinks there is no one standing in her way. I opened the message thread. I typed, Mom, I don't know what is happening. The police are asking so many questions. I feel like everyone is watching me. I can't sleep. I see fire every time I close my eyes. Maybe you were right. Maybe I am not handling this. I just want it to stop. I just want to go away. I showed it to Ethan. He read it. He looked at me with concern. That sounds very convincing. Good, I said. Let her think I am folding. I pressed send. Delivered. Almost immediately. The 3 dots appeared. She was typing. Oh, honey, I am so sorry. Listen to me. Don't talk to the police anymore. They just confuse things. Why don't you come to the house this weekend? We are having a family gathering on Sunday. Just aunts and uncles. We can take care of you. We can figure this out together. I stared at the screen. A family gathering. A trap. She wants to bring me in, I said. She wants to display me to the family. Look at poor, crazy Vivian. Look at how much she needs her mother. Are you going? Ethan asked. If I go, I said. It creates a stage, a room full of witnesses, a room full of people who have heard her lies. I looked at Ethan. If I am going to bring her down, I shouldn't do it in a deposition room. I should do it in front of the audience she built. Vivian, Ethan said, if you go there, you are walking into the lion's den. No, I said, a cold smile touching my lips. I am walking into the courtroom. They just don't know court is in session yet. I typed back. Okay, Mom, I will come. I just need to be with family. I put the phone down. The net was tightening. Sloan had the legal papers. Caleb had the arson evidence. Ethan had the digital trail. But the final piece, the confession, the breakdown, the undeniable proof of their guilt, that wasn't going to come from a file. That was going to come from Denise herself. I was going to give her the performance of a lifetime. And when the curtain fell, she would be the one in handcuffs. The invitation came on Thursday afternoon, wrapped in a voice so saccharine it made my teeth ache. "Vivian, sweetheart," Denise crooned into the phone. "I was thinking, with everything going on, we haven't had a chance to just be a family. I am hosting a little get-together this Sunday. Just the aunts, uncles, and cousins. Everyone is so worried about you. They all want to see that you are okay." I held the phone away from my ear. Staring at the screen, I knew exactly what this was. It wasn't a barbecue. It wasn't a support group. It was a staged trial. Denise knew the rumors were swirling. She knew I had hired a lawyer. She knew the insurance money was frozen. She needed to solidify her narrative before the cracks in her foundation became visible. She needed to parade me in front of the family, the unstable, traumatized, erratic daughter, so that when the legal hammer dropped, she could play the victim of a mentally ill child's vendetta. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice neutral, "I don't know if I am up for a party." "It is not a party, Vivian," she corrected, her tone dipping into that practiced maternal concern that fooled everyone but me. "It is a healing circle. Aunt Linda is making her potato salad. Uncle Ray is coming down from Boulder. We just want to wrap our arms around you. Please, do it for me?" Do it for me, the mantra of her life. "Okay," I said. "I will be there." "Wonderful," she chirped. 1 o'clock. Don't be late. And wear something nice. Honey, you have looked so disheveled lately." I hung up and immediately opened a group chat with Caleb and Sloan. "Vivian, the trap is set. She is gathering the whole family this Sunday at 1. She wants an audience. She wants to discredit you. If you go, she controls the environment." Vivian, "I know, but I'm not going there to eat potato salad. I am going there to keep her occupied. If she is busy performing for the family, she won't be looking at the front door." Caleb, "The warrant is signed. The DA gave the green light based on the hardware store footage and the credit header link. We are ready to move." Vivian, "Don't come to my apartment. Come to the house. I want you to do it there." Sloan, "Vivian, that is theatrical and risky." Vivian, "She spent 40 years building a fake image for these people. I want the truth to tear it down in front of the exact same crowd." 1 o'clock. Caleb, "We will be there at 1:30. Gives you 30 minutes to get everyone in one room. Stay safe." Sunday arrived with a sky the color of bruised iron. Cedar Ridge Estates, the neighborhood where Denise and Frank lived, was a labyrinth of manicured lawns and houses that looked like they were built out of beige stucco and ego. I pulled my rental car, a compact sedan that looked like a toy compared to the SUVs lining the street, up to the curb. The driveway was full. Frank's new Lexus sparkled in the driveway, a sleek silver monument to the money they didn't have yet, but were already spending. I sat in the car for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic, syncopated rhythm. I wasn't scared of them anymore. I was past fear. But the adrenaline of what was about to happen was potent. I was about to blow up my own family. There was no coming back from today. Once I walked through those doors and Caleb followed, the bridge wouldn't just be burned, it would be nuked. "You are not here to beg," I whispered to the reflection in the rear-view mirror. "You are not here to scream. You are here to finish it." I stepped out of the car. The air was cold, biting at my cheeks. I smoothed down my coat. I hadn't dressed nice as Denise requested. I wore dark jeans and a black turtleneck. I looked like I was dressed for a funeral, which, in a way, I was. I walked up the driveway. I could hear the murmur of voices from inside. Laughter, the clinking of glass. It sounded so normal. It sounded like 1,000 other Sunday afternoons from my childhood, where I sat in the corner while Denise held court, charming everyone with her stories while pinching my arm under the table if I fidgeted. I rang the doorbell. The noise inside didn't stop, but the door opened almost instantly. It was Aunt Linda. "Vivian!" she gasped, throwing her hands up as if I were a soldier returning from war, rather than a niece who lived 30 minutes away. "Oh, honey, Look at you. She pulled me into a hug that smelled of hairspray and pity. You look so thin. Are you eating? Denise said you haven't been eating. I am fine. Aunt Linda, I said, extricating myself. Come in. Come in. Everyone is waiting. She ushered me into the living room. It was packed. 20 people, maybe more. My cousins were clustered by the fireplace. Uncle Ray was near the bar cart. Frank was sitting in his leather armchair, holding a tumbler of scotch, looking like the lord of the manor, and in the center of it all, wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater and perfectly applied makeup, was Denise. When she saw me, the room went silent. It was a practiced silence, a hush that she had likely orchestrated. Vivi, she breathed. She crossed the room in 3 strides and enveloped me in a hug. It wasn't warm, it was possessive. Her arms locked around me, pinning my arms to my sides. She squeezed tight, rocking me slightly. My brave girl, she whispered, loud enough for the back row to hear. I am so glad you came. I was so worried you wouldn't make it. I stood stiffly in her embrace. I could smell the beautiful perfume. It was the same scent Brenda Miller had smelled at the insurance office, the scent of the woman who stole my name. I am here, Mom, I said flatly. She pulled back, holding me at arm's length. Her eyes scanned my face, looking for cracks. She turned to the room, keeping a hand on my shoulder, presenting me like an exhibit. Doesn't she look tired? Denise said to the room, her voice dripping with sympathy. But she is here. That is what matters. Family heals everything. There was a murmur of agreement. Good to see you, Viv, Uncle Ray called out. Tough break about the apartment. Thanks, Uncle Ray, I said. Frank stood up. He didn't smile. He looked at me with a hard, warning stare. Grab a plate. Vivian, don't make a scene. I am not hungry. Frank, I said. Eat anyway, he commanded, masking it as hospitality. You look like a ghost. I moved to the edge of the room, near the window. I needed a vantage point. I needed to see the driveway. I checked my watch. 1:10, 20 minutes until the cavalry arrived. For the next 15 minutes, I endured the torture of concern. Cousins came up to me, asking questions that were clearly fed to them by Denise. Is it true you didn't hear the alarm? One cousin asked. Is it true you were off your anxiety meds? Another whispered. I looked at them. I don't take anxiety meds. Oh, the cousin said, looking confused. Aunt Denise said. Denise says a lot of things, I said. Denise was working the room. I watched her. She was in her element. She was touching arms, laughing softly, shaking her head with a martyr's grace whenever my name came up. She was building the wall brick by brick, painting me as the broken, delusional daughter who needed her parents to take over her life and her finances. At 1:25, Denise clinked a spoon against a glass. Everyone, she said. The room quieted down. If I could just have a moment. She walked to the center of the rug. She looked at Frank, who nodded supportively. Then she looked at me. Her expression shifted into a mask of tragic bravery. I just want to thank you all for coming, she began. This has been a nightmare week, as many of you know. Vivian lost her home. It is a tragedy. But what is more tragic is the toll it has taken on her mind. She paused for effect. I felt the blood heat up in my veins. This was it, the smear campaign, live and in person. We are dealing with some confusion, Denise continued, her voice trembling slightly. Vivian has been under so much stress. She has been saying things, hurtful things, imagining plots against her, blaming the people who love her most. She looked at me with wet, pleading eyes. Vivi, honey, I know you are angry at the world right now. I know you are looking for someone to blame for the fire. But we are your family. We are not your enemies. We just want to help you manage everything, the insurance, the doctors, the future. The room turned to look at me. The weight of their judgment was heavy. They saw a mother reaching out. They didn't see the shark beneath the water. I stepped forward. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I walked to the center of the room, stopping about 5 feet from her. "You want to help with the insurance?" I asked. My voice was quiet, but in the silence of the room, it carried like a bell. "Of course, baby," Denise said, smiling nervously. "Frank and I can handle the paperwork. You are too overwhelmed." "I bet you can," I said. "Since you already handled the paperwork 7 months ago," Denise's smile faltered. "What are you talking about?" "The beneficiary change," I said. "July 14th, the day you visited my apartment, the day you stole my information." A ripple of confusion went through the room. Frank stood up straighter, his hands clenching into fists. "Vivian," Frank barked, "that is enough. You are doing exactly what your mother said. You are ranting." "Am I?" I looked at Frank, then back at Denise. "Let's ask a simple question. Mom, since we are all family here, since we are all honest—" I took a breath. "How long were you at my apartment the night you visited?" "The Friday before the fire," Denise laughed. A high, brittle sound. "Oh, for heaven's sake, I told you. 20 minutes. I dropped in. I said hello. I left. Why does that matter?" 20 minutes, I repeated. "Yes, 20 minutes. Then why?" I said, raising my voice just a fraction. "Do the hallway cameras show you inside for 3 hours?" The room went dead silent. The kind of silence where you can hear a heartbeat. Denise's face went pale beneath her makeup. That is ridiculous. The cameras must be broken, or you are misinterpreting." "And why?" I cut her off. "Did you walk in carrying a heavy black gym bag, but walk out 3 hours later empty-handed?" Denise took a step back. Her eyes darted around the room, looking for an exit, looking for an ally. But the relatives were looking at her now. The specificity of the detail, the black bag, the 3 hours, had pierced the fog of her generalities. "I don't know what you are talking about," Denise snapped, the sweetness vanishing. "There was no bag. You are hallucinating. This is the trauma talking. Frank, get her out of here. She is having an episode." "It wasn't a hallucination. Mom," I said, relentless. "It was on video, just like you were on video at the insurance office, wearing that hat, wearing that bracelet." I pointed to the gold bangle on her wrist, the one I had given her. "You signed my name," I said. "You put yourself down for 100% of the payout, $160,000. That is the number, isn't it? That is what I am worth to you." Frank lunged forward. He grabbed my arm, his grip bruising. "Shut up," he hissed, his face inches from mine, smelling of scotch and fear. "You ungrateful little brat. You are making a fool of yourself. Get to the car. Now." "Let go of me," I said, wrenching my arm away. "Or what? You will burn this house down too?" "How dare you?" Aunt Linda shrieked from the corner. "Vivian, apologize to your father." "He is not my father," I said, turning to the room. "And she is not a victim. They are broke, aren't they? The Lexus, the credit cards, you guys are drowning in debt, and you needed a lifeboat, so you built one out of my apartment." "Lies!" Denise screamed. Her mask had fully cracked now. Her face was twisted in ugly, desperate rage. "She is lying. She is sick." I checked the hardware store records. "Mom," I said. "Redwood Home and Hardware, you bought a Guardian plug-in timer and a paraffin log. They have you on camera at the checkout. They have the receipt." Denise froze. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The mention of the specific store, the specific items, it was the detail that killed the denial. Frank looked at Denise. Panic flared in his eyes. He knew. Of course he knew. He was the beneficiary too. "We are leaving," Frank announced, grabbing Denise's arm. "Party is over. Everyone out. Vivian needs to go to a hospital." He reached into his pocket to grab his car keys. But instead of keys, he pulled out his phone. It was buzzing, a long, continuous vibration that seemed to shake his whole hand. He looked at the screen. I saw the blood drain from his face until he looked like gray putty. "Who is it? Frank?" I asked softly. Is it the alarm company? Or is it the front gate security? Frank didn't answer. He stared at the phone as if it were a bomb. Then, the sound cut through the tension like a knife. Ding dong, the doorbell. It wasn't a casual ring. It was authoritative, a solid, 2-second press. The room froze. Everyone looked at the door. Aunt Linda put her hand over her mouth. "I think you should get that," I said to Denise. Denise stood paralyzed. She looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw true fear in her eyes. Not the performative fear she used for attention, but the primal fear of an animal that realizes the cage door has just slammed shut. "Vivian," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What did you do?" "I didn't do anything," I said, smoothing my turtleneck. "I just invited a few more guests to the party." The doorbell rang again, more urgent this time, and then a heavy fist pounded on the wood. Boom, boom, boom. "Police! Open the door!" The sound reverberated through the beige stucco walls. The glass in the china cabinet rattled. Frank dropped his phone. It hit the hardwood floor with a crack. I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who had birthed me, who had manipulated me, who had decided my life was disposable currency. "You said you wanted the family together," I said. "Well, now everyone is here." I walked over to the door. Frank made a move to stop me, but he saw the look in my eyes. Or maybe he saw the flashing red and blue lights bleeding through the sheer curtains. And he stopped. He sank into his chair, a defeated man. I put my hand on the doorknob. It felt cold. It felt like justice. I turned it and pulled the door wide open. Caleb Rourke stood there, flanked by 2 uniformed officers and Sloane Hart. He looked past me, into the living room, his eyes locking onto the woman in the cream sweater. "Denise Mallory," Caleb said, his voice booming through the silent house. "Frank Mallory." He stepped across the threshold, bringing the winter cold in with him. "You are under arrest." Caleb Rourke did not shout. He did not storm into the room with his gun drawn or bark orders like a television cop. He simply stepped across the threshold of my mother's house, bringing the biting winter wind in with him, and the temperature in the living room seemed to drop 20 degrees in a single second. 2 uniformed officers flanked him. They were silent, imposing figures in dark blue, their hands resting loosely near their belts, their faces impassive masks of state authority. Behind them, Sloane Hart stepped into the foyer, clutching a leather briefcase like a weapon. She looked sharp, dangerous, and entirely out of place among the beige carpets and family photos. The silence that had fallen over the room when the doorbell rang now stretched into something brittle and terrifying. My relatives, aunts holding plates of half-eaten appetizers, cousins with drinks frozen halfway to their mouths, stared at the intruders. They looked from the police to Denise, then back to the police, their brains struggling to reconcile the cozy Sunday gathering with the sudden intrusion of the criminal justice system. Denise was the first to move. She took a step back, her hand flying to her throat, clutching the pearl necklace I had not given her. "What is this?" she demanded, though her voice lacked its usual command. It was thin, reedy. "Who are you people? You cannot just barge into a private home." Caleb ignored the question. He walked into the center of the living room, his heavy boots leaving wet prints on the pristine hardwood. He stopped 3 feet from where Denise and Frank stood. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document. He unfolded it with a deliberate, crinkling sound that echoed in the quiet house. "Denise Mallory," Caleb said. His voice was gravel and iron, carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "Frank Mallory." "I am Frank Mallory," my stepfather said, trying to muster some bluster, though I could see the tremor in his hands. "And I want to know why you are interrupting my family." "I have a warrant for your arrest," Caleb interrupted, cutting through Frank's protest like a blade. He looked down at the paper. "Issued by the District Court of Jefferson County." The words hung in the air. Arrest. It was a dirty word in Cedar Ridge Estates. It was a word that belonged to other people, to the news, to the desperate, not to them. Arrest? Aunt Linda squeaked from the corner. For what? Caleb looked up, his eyes hard. For conspiracy to commit arson in the first degree, for insurance fraud in the first degree, for forgery, and for identity theft. Denise let out a sound that was half gasp, half scream. It was a shrill, piercing noise that shattered the paralysis of the room. No! She shrieked. She turned wildly to the family, her arms wide, her face twisting into a mask of outraged victimhood. Do you hear this? This is insane. This is what I was telling you. Vivian did this. She pointed a shaking finger at me. I stood near the door, motionless, watching her unravel. She is sick, Denise yelled, tears instantly springing to her eyes. A performance I had seen 1,000 times, but never with stakes this high. She called the police. She made up lies. She is trying to ruin us because she is jealous. She is unstable. She grabbed Uncle Ray's arm, shaking him. Ray, tell them. Tell them she has been acting crazy. Tell them she is paranoid. Ray looked at Denise, then at the police, his face pale and confused. Denise, I don't know. She set me up, Denise screamed, turning back to Caleb. This is a setup. My daughter is mentally ill. You are arresting the wrong people. She probably burned down her own apartment for attention. That is enough, Caleb said. He didn't raise his voice, but the authority in it snapped Denise's tirade in half. We are not here on the word of your daughter, Mrs. Mallory. We are here on the evidence. Evidence? Denise scoffed, a desperate, manic laugh bubbling up. What evidence? You have nothing. You have the ravings of a girl who forgot to turn off a stove. I stepped forward then. I reached into my bag and pulled out the tablet Ethan had lent me. The screen was large, bright. I tapped the video file we had prepared. We have this? Mom, I said. I turned the screen toward the room, toward Aunt Linda, toward Uncle Ray, toward the cousins. Look, I commanded. The video played. It showed the lobby of the Element Apartments. It showed Denise walking in. That is you, Denise, Uncle Ray whispered, squinting. That is your coat. So what? Denise snapped. I told you I visited her. I brought her cookies. Watch her hand, I said, on the screen. Denise walked toward the elevator, the heavy black gym bag sagging in her grip. The weight of it was obvious. It pulled her shoulder down. You see that bag? I asked the room. That is a heavy bag, maybe 20 pounds, full of liquid, full of equipment. It was old clothes, Denise stammered. I was donating them to her. Okay, I said calmly. Then watch this. I swiped to the next clip. The timestamp showed 3 hours later. Denise walking out of the apartment, walking to the elevator. Her hands were empty. Where is the bag, Mom? I asked. You didn't leave it in the donate pile. You didn't mention it. And when the fire investigators searched the debris, do you know what they found? Denise went silent. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish on dry land. They didn't find clothes, I said. They found melted plastic from a timer, and they found traces of an accelerant. I looked at my family. They were staring at the screen, then at Denise. The dot connecting was happening in real time. The bag went in, the bag stayed, the fire started. That proves nothing, Frank shouted, stepping in front of Denise. So she left a bag. Big deal. You can't prove what was in it. This is circumstantial. Sloane Hart stepped forward. Her heels clicked sharply on the wood floor. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper, holding it up like a death sentence. We can prove quite a lot, actually, Sloane said. Her voice was cool, professional, a stark contrast to the emotional heat in the room. I represent Ms. Ortiz in the matter of the fraudulent insurance claim filed with Harborstone Assurance. She turned to the gathered relatives. On July 15th, the day after Mrs. Mallory was seen on camera entering the apartment with that bag, a woman walked into the Harborstone branch on 3rd Avenue. Sloane gestured to the document. This woman claimed to be Vivian Ortiz. She presented a fake ID. She signed a document changing the beneficiary of Vivian's renter's insurance policy to Denise and Frank Mallory. 100% payout. Total value, $160,000. A gasp went through the room. Aunt Linda covered her mouth with both hands. 160,000? A cousin whispered. We have a witness. Sloane continued, her eyes locking onto Denise. The clerk at the counter, Brenda Miller. She identified you. Mrs. Mallory. She picked your photo out of a lineup this morning. Denise shook her head violently. No, she is lying. She remembered you specifically, Sloane said, delivering the blow with surgical precision. She remembered your hat. She remembered your sunglasses. But mostly, she remembered your scent. She said you smelled like powdery gardenias. Like Beautiful, by Estee Lauder. Sloane sniffed the air theatrically. The same perfume you are wearing right now. Denise took a step back, her back hitting the mantel of the fireplace. She looked trapped. She looked at her sister, Linda. Linda looked away. And, Sloane added, pointing to Denise's wrist. The clerk identified that bracelet, the gold bangle with the heart charm. It is visible on the security footage at the bank counter, the same bracelet you wore to sign a death warrant on your daughter's financial future. Denise covered her wrist with her other hand, a reflex of guilt so pure it was almost blinding. This is ridiculous, Frank sputtered. But his voice was losing power. He was sweating now, beads of perspiration forming on his upper lip. I didn't sign anything. I wasn't there. You can't pin this on me. Caleb stepped back into the fray. He held up a plastic evidence bag. Inside was a photocopy of a receipt. We tracked the serial number of the timer found in the fire debris, Caleb said. It was a Guardian home control unit, sold at Redwood Home and Hardware in Aurora. He looked at Frank. We have the store security footage from January 28th. It shows you, Mr. Mallory, standing at the checkout counter. You're purchasing one Guardian timer and one Duralog paraffin fire starter. Frank's face drained of all color. It went from flushed red to a sickly, ash gray. Frank started. I was fixing the deck. I needed the timer for the deck lights. And the fire starter? Caleb asked. For a deck in the middle of winter? It was for the fireplace, Frank yelled, gesturing to the gas fireplace behind him. We have a fireplace. This is a gas fireplace, Frank, Uncle Ray said. His voice was quiet, shocked. You don't use logs in a gas fireplace. The room fell silent again. The logic was inescapable. The web was tight. You bought the device, Caleb said to Frank. Your wife planted it, and you both signed the insurance papers to profit from the loss. Caleb nodded to the officers. Cuff them. The officers moved forward. The sound of heavy boots on the floor was the only thing audible in the terrified silence. One officer reached for Denise. She recoiled, slapping his hand away. Don't touch me, she shrieked. I am a mother. I am a victim here. My daughter is the criminal. She is doing this to me. She spun around, grabbing Frank by the lapels of his jacket. Her eyes were wild, manic, the eyes of a woman watching her entire world collapse. Frank, do something, she screamed at him. Tell them we didn't do it. Tell them it is a mistake. Frank stood frozen. The officer was pulling his arms behind his back. The metallic click, click, click of the handcuffs echoed through the room like gunshots. I told you, Frank stammered, looking at the floor, refusing to meet her eyes. I told you I didn't know about the bag. I just bought what you asked for. I didn't know you were going to use it. He was throwing her under the bus. In the first 10 seconds of pressure, he was cutting her loose. Denise froze. She looked at her husband. She looked at the man she had conspired with, the man she had promised a payout to. You didn't know? She hissed. You didn't know? The officer grabbed Denise's wrist, the one with the gold bracelet, and twisted it behind her back. Mrs. Mallory, you are under arrest, the officer said. The pain, or the humiliation, or the sheer betrayal of Frank's words snapped the last thread of Denise's control. She fought against the officer's grip, thrashing wildly. She wasn't looking at me anymore. She was staring right at Frank, her face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. "You coward!" she screamed at him, her voice raw and tearing at her throat. "You spineless coward! You were the one who said we needed the money. You were the one who said the loan sharks were coming." "Shut up! Denise!" Frank roared, struggling against his own cuffs. "Shut your mouth!" "No," Denise wailed. And then, the words came out, the words that hung in the air like smoke, the words that sealed the coffin. "You promised this wouldn't blow up," she shrieked, the tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. "You promised if we used the timer, it would look like an accident. You said no one would know." The room seemed to vibrate with the force of the admission. "You promised if we used the timer, it would look like an accident." Aunt Linda let out a sob and collapsed onto the sofa. Uncle Ray turned away, looking like he was going to be sick. The cousins stared with wide, horrified eyes. The confession was out. It wasn't a deduction anymore. It wasn't a theory. It was a scream of guilt, witnessed by 20 people and 3 police officers. Frank closed his eyes and slumped his shoulders. He knew it was over. Caleb looked at me. He didn't smile. He just gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "We got them." I stood by the door, watching. I expected to feel triumphant. I expected to feel a surge of joy, a vindictive thrill at seeing them in handcuffs, seeing their reputation shredded in front of the very people they tried to turn against me. But I didn't feel joy. I felt a profound, hollow silence. I looked at my mother. She was weeping now. Loud, ugly sobs, pleading with the officer, pleading with Linda, pleading with anyone who would listen. She looked small. She looked pathetic. She was no longer the monster who burned my home. She was just a greedy, desperate woman who had loved money more than she loved her own child. "I am sorry," Frank was muttering to the officer. "I will cooperate. I will tell you everything. It was her idea. She planned the date." "He is lying!" Denise screamed. "It was him!" They were devouring each other. The united front that had said, "Not our problem," was now a pit of vipers biting at each other's throats. I looked at the relatives. They were looking at me now, not with suspicion, not with pity, but with shame. They knew they had listened to her. They knew they had doubted me. Uncle Ray took a step toward me. "Vivian, I held up a hand. I didn't want their apologies. Their apologies were late. Their apologies were easy." "Take them away," Caleb ordered. The officers marched Denise and Frank toward the door. As they passed me, Denise stopped fighting. She looked up. Her eyes met mine. For a second, I thought she might say she was sorry. I thought she might finally be a mother. "How could you?" she whispered to me, her voice full of venom. "I gave you life." I looked at her, at the woman who had walked into my apartment with a bag of fire. "And you tried to take it back for a check," I said softly. "We are even." The officer pushed her forward. She stumbled out into the cold wind. Frank following behind her. The door didn't close. The cold air continued to pour in, cleansing the house of the scent of potpourri and lies. Caleb stopped in front of me. "We have the confession," he said quietly. "With the witnesses here. This is a slam dunk. They aren't walking away from this." "Thank you, Caleb," I said. "You did good." "Vivian," he said, "go home. Get some rest." He walked out. I stood alone in the entryway of the house I had visited for holidays. The house where I had tried so hard to be the good daughter. The party was over. The food was getting cold. The guests were shattered statues. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. I didn't wait for Aunt Linda to hug me. I turned around and walked out the door. I walked to my rental car. I sat in the driver's seat and closed the door, sealing out the noise, the sirens, the wind. I put my hands on the steering wheel. They were steady. I looked at the house one last time. Frank's Lexus was still in the driveway. It would probably be repossessed soon. The house would probably go to pay the legal fees. It was all going to burn down, just like my apartment. But I wasn't in the fire this time. I was watching from the outside. I started the car. The engine purred to life. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just put the car in gear and drove away, leaving the ashes of my family in the rearview mirror. Finally driving towards something that felt like my own life. The silence that followed the police cruisers leaving the driveway was heavy enough to crush a person. Inside the house, the party had dissolved into a chaotic, whispering panic. My relatives, the same ones who had looked at me with pity and suspicion only an hour before, now looked like they had just woken up from a collective hypnosis. The spell Denise had cast, the image of the perfect, grieving mother, had been shattered by the click of handcuffs and the cold, hard reading of rights. I did not stay to watch them process it. I drove away, leaving them to pick through the wreckage of their own judgment in the days that followed. My phone became a repository for guilt. Aunt Linda left 3 voicemails. Her voice was trembling, filled with a frantic need to absolve herself. I didn't know. Vivian, you have to believe me. She was so convincing. I am so sorry. Cousins sent long text messages explaining that they were confused and manipulated. I read them, but I felt nothing. Their apologies were like ash, gray, weightless, and messy. They were sorry because the truth was undeniable, not because they had believed in me when it mattered. I did not reply. I didn't need their guilt to validate my reality. 2 weeks later, I sat in Sloane Hart's office again. The atmosphere was different this time. The tension of the chase was gone, replaced by the bureaucratic efficiency of victory. Sloane slid a document across the desk. It was from Harborstone Assurance. "The freeze is lifted," Sloane said, her voice carrying a rare note of satisfaction. "Harborstone has completed their internal review. Given the police report, the confession from Frank, and the video evidence, they have voided the fraudulent beneficiary change. The policy stands in your name, and your name alone." She tapped the paper. "They are processing the payout for the total loss of property and the liability coverage, after deducting my retainer and the legal fees for the civil suit we filed to ensure this happens. The check will be for roughly $160,000. I looked at the number. $160,000. It was enough to start over. It was enough to buy a small condo, or travel for a year, or just put into a savings account and breathe. But looking at it, all I could think about was the price tag my parents had put on my life. "We also found the motive," Caleb said. He was standing by the window, looking out at the city. He turned to face me. "We subpoenaed their financial records. It wasn't just greed, Vivian. It was desperation." "How bad was it?" I asked. "Catastrophic," Caleb said. "Frank has been addicted to sports betting for 3 years. He was using offshore apps, leveraging credit cards to cover losses. He was down nearly $80,000. And Denise? She was spending to keep up appearances. The Lexus, the clothes, the parties. She had 6 maxed-out credit cards hidden in a safety deposit box. They were drowning. They were weeks away from foreclosure on the house." I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "So they decided to burn down my apartment to pay off a bookie and visa. It was the only asset they could access," Caleb said. "You were the path of least resistance. They thought you were isolated. They thought you were weak. They bet on you folding." "They lost that bet," I said. "The legal process that followed was ugly, fast, and absolute. Frank, true to his character, crumbled the moment the pressure applied. He cut a deal with the district attorney. He offered full cooperation in exchange for a lighter sentence. He sat in an interrogation room and poured out every detail. Desperate to paint himself as the reluctant husband dragged along by a master manipulator. He told them everything. How Denise picked the date because she knew I had a deadline at work and would be sleeping heavily. How she bought the timer. How she practiced the forgery. Denise tried to fight it. She hired a lawyer she couldn't afford and tried to claim Frank was abusive. That he forced her to do it, but the evidence was a steel trap. The subpoenas on their phones revealed a text thread that destroyed her defense. "Denise, Did you get the timer? Get the heavy-duty one. Frank, got it. And the logs. Are you sure about the timing? Denise, Tuesday is best. She sleeps like the dead after leg day. Frank, don't forget the bag. We need to make sure nothing comes back to the house. The leg day comment. That small, intimate detail about my life that she had used to calculate the moment of my destruction. That was what made the jury gasp. It was the coldness of it. The maternal knowledge weaponized. The sentencing hearing was 6 months after the fire. I sat in the back row, flanked by Ethan and Sloane. I didn't want to be there, but I needed to see the period put at the end of the sentence. Denise wore an orange jumpsuit. Her hair, usually dyed and coiffed, was gray at the roots and pulled back in a severe bun. She looked 10 years older. She refused to look at me. The judge was a stern woman who had clearly seen enough of humanity's dark side to have no patience for it. She read the sentence with a monotone finality. Denise Mallory, for the charges of arson in the first degree, insurance fraud, and identity theft. You are sentenced to 7 years in the state correctional facility. You will be eligible for parole after 5 years. 7 years. Frank got 3 years, with a suspended sentence after 18 months, followed by 5 years of probation and mandatory treatment for gambling addiction. It was over, but legal closure is not the same as safety. Before I left the courthouse, Sloane filed the final paperwork I had requested, a permanent restraining order. It was comprehensive. No contact, no third-party communication, no letters, no phone calls. If they tried to reach me, they went back to jail. I cut the rest of the cords. 2. I blocked the phone numbers of every aunt, uncle, and cousin who had attended that party and stayed silent. I changed my email address. I changed my phone number. I didn't want to sift through the ashes of those relationships looking for embers. I wanted a clean slate. I moved to Ridgeview Harbor. It was a new development on the other side of the city, perched on a hill overlooking the reservoir. My new apartment was on the 3rd floor. It had concrete walls and a sprinkler system that looked like industrial art. The first thing I did was install a security system. It wasn't the standard package. I had cameras on the door, motion sensors on the windows, and a smart lock that logged every entry and exit to a cloud server I controlled. I set up 2-factor authentication for every account I owned. I put a credit freeze on my social security number. Some might call it paranoia. I called it ownership. For the first time in my life, I knew exactly who had access to my world. The fear that had lived in my chest since the fire began to fade, replaced by the quiet, steady hum of control. Ethan helped me move in. He carried the boxes of new books, new clothes, and new dishes. We didn't talk much about the fire anymore. We talked about work, about movies, about the terrible coffee at the office. He wasn't just a coworker anymore. He, along with Caleb, who occasionally checked in just to say hello, and a few friends from college, became my circle. We were a small group. We were tight. We were honest. They were the people who showed up when I had nothing. That, I realized, was the only qualification for family that mattered. 3 months after the sentencing, a letter arrived at my lawyer's office. Sloane called me. "It is from the correctional facility," she said. "From Denise? Do you want me to shred it?" I sat in my new living room, looking out at the lights of the city reflecting off the dark water of the reservoir. "No," I said. "Scan it. Send it to me." I needed to see it. I needed to see if she had changed. The email arrived a few minutes later. The handwriting was familiar. The same script that had signed my death warrant on the insurance form, but shaky now. "My dearest Vivian, I hope you are well. I think about you every day. It is so cold in here. I miss our talks. I know you are angry, and I know mistakes were made, but I want you to know that I forgive you for what happened in court. I know you were under pressure. We can get past this. I am still your mother. We are still blood. When I get out, we can start over. Please write to me. I am so lonely. Love, Mom." I read it twice. "I forgive you." She forgave me. She forgave me for stopping her from burning my life down. She forgave me for not letting her steal $160,000. She was still rewriting the story, even from a prison cell. She was still the victim. She was still the mother who deserved adoration. I didn't cry. I didn't feel the urge to scream. I felt a profound, dry clarity. I didn't reply. I didn't print it out to burn it. That would be too dramatic, too much like something she would do. Instead, I opened a new document on my laptop. I typed a single paragraph. Not for her, but for me. A reminder for the days when the guilt might try to creep back in. Family is not the people who have the same blood. Family is not the people who share a last name. Family is the people who do not burn your house down and then demand you call it love. I saved the file. I dragged Denise's email into the trash folder. I clicked empty trash, and just like that, she was gone. I stood up and walked to the balcony. The night air was crisp, smelling of pine and rain, not smoke. Below me, the city was a grid of golden lights, alive and breathing. The fire had taken everything I owned. It had taken my photos, my clothes, my sense of safety. But as I stood there, breathing in the clean air, I realized it had given me something too. It had burned away the obligation. It had burned away the guilt. It had burned away the illusion that I owed my life to the people who gave it to me. The fire had scorched the earth, yes, but in the ashes, I had found the one thing I never had before. I was free. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment down below and share your thoughts on Vivian's journey. Did she do the right thing? If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel Lucy Revenge Stories, like the video, and smash that hype button so this story can reach even more people. Your support means the world to me.